Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for coming today and listening to us, inshallah, to discuss on the Thought Adventure podcast. Apologies for the slight delay. We were just waiting for one of the panelists, but it doesn't matter now. Alhamdulillah, he's here. So today's show, we're going to be talking about flying horses, splitting moons, whether it is irrational to believe in miracles. So if some of you listened to not last week's, but 2 weeks ago, the podcast, we were discussing about whether the Trinity is irrational. And one of the questions that was raised, which we thought we would then discuss and tackle today, was this idea that, well, if you say Trinity is irrational, isn't belief in like the Buraq, the flying animal that took the Prophet ﷺ beyond the seven heavens in one night, isn't that something that's irrational? And if you can accept that, why can't we accept Trinity? Similarly, you have many atheists who will turn around and ask this same type of question in regards to, how can you believe religion is true and they believe in these supernatural, these, legends and stories about, miracles and supernatural events, etc. So what we're asking today is whether belief in miracles is irrational, how we should approach it, how we should understand it. And as always today, alhamdulillah, we have our panelists. We have Yusuf Ponders from Pondering Soul. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How you doing?
And alhamdulillah, good. We've also got Jake, the Muslim Metaphysician. Assalamu alaikum. He needs to learn how to unmic.
Unmute.
Sorry.
It's going to be Jake's signature move.
And we've also got Abdurrahman as well, Al-Shayab from Abdurrahman.
He's got some glorious hair today as well.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks. Wa alaikum salam.
As always, in these conversations, we normally have a short introduction for about 20 minutes where we start to talk about the topic area. And then what we want people to join, Muslims or non-Muslims, preferably non-Muslims who want to challenge the ideas, debate the discussion. So that'll be after about 20 minutes or so. So please be patient if you want to try join now. I think the StreamYard link should be pinned in the comment section. But let me just quickly ask the first question, actually, to Brother Jake. Jake, why this topic? Why are we talking about miracles? Are we not like, on the other topics that we should be discussing first? Why is this such an important topic? You need to unmute.
Yeah, I got to unmute. So, yeah, the reason why this topic is so important from my perspective is that, like you mentioned in the last stream, there's sort of two issues. One is when we were discussing the Trinity, sometimes the response we get is, well, you guys are saying that the Trinity is irrational, but yet you believe in these strange miracles, which are just as irrational as the Trinity itself. So we want to take that criticism on board and combat it to show that, well, actually, no, the two are not analogous. And so maybe we'll go into more detail about that. The second thing is that from Muslims and skeptics, typically we get charged with the idea that the idea of miracles is completely irrational. It's illogical because it breaks laws of nature, and such a thing is impossible. So it's these two ideas, as far as I can see, that we want to address and combat.
Cool. Abdurrahman, this question was, I think it was leveled at in one of the comments to say, look, we're putting the cart before the horse. We're talking about miracles to atheists, and we should be talking about more fundamental, discussions about belief in Allah. So why is it that, this is an issue that needs to be addressed even with atheists?
Yeah, well, I think they come hand in hand in a way, because the way you look at any claim to a miraculous account or any event for that matter is always going to depend on your prior metaphysical commitments and your worldview as a whole that kind of determines how you are to assess the evidence and make sense of what's being said. So I think in a way that comment you're talking about does have a point, that there is a more fundamental issue at play here, which is the basically the lens through which you're assessing these matters, and your overarching worldview through which you kind of investigate the evidence. But in order to, I think, get to that more fundamental aspect of this discussion, I think we need to deal with these questions about miracles very seriously. And I think the whole topic of miracles is a very good segue to that kind of discussion about the fundamental nature of reality and these metaphysical and epistemological concerns that we have in our assessment of these, claims about extraordinary events.
Okay, cool. I think the way maybe I also look at this is some people think this is a defeater for religion. So they think that I cannot even acknowledge or accept the belief in any religious claim if a religion claims to adhere to some sort of supernatural event or miraculous event. And so if a religion claims that, the moon split, or that, some other miracle events, people walking on water, that automatically dismisses a religious claim. And so there's more of a fundamental question that we have to ask is, what refutes a religion? What can we say is, makes a religion incompatible, to reason and rationality, becomes illogical? Is miracles a good argument for that? And maybe that goes on to the other question I was going to ask Brother Yusuf as well, which was that obviously last week we talked about the Trinity. Last couple of weeks ago, we talked about the Trinity, and we talked about the logical problem of the Trinity. And we basically, in essence, I think the conclusion that we're trying to present anyway, at least, is the Trinity by definition is illogical. And as a result, anybody who claims that Christianity promotes this, by definition means that the religion itself, we would say, is incorrect, because there has to be some sort of rational consistency, logical consistency with regards to this. But how do we explain that on the one hand? And I don't want to go over the whole discussion about Trinity, by the way, but how do we demarcate the discussion about Trinity and miracles? Are they equivalent? Can you say, okay, if we can accept miracles, we can accept Trinity. If we have to reject Trinity, then we'd have to reject even claims within Islam.
Yeah, so the issue is the presence of an explicit contradiction. And so, for example, when you're talking about whether or not Jesus is God, and we're saying that there's a contradiction, a logical contradiction, and therefore it's illogical or irrational. And we're saying that you're holding two contradictory premises. You're holding premise A and premise not A, or element A, element not A, simultaneously, and these are incompatible together in the same thing. So, like one of the examples we gave, can you be 5 foot tall if you're 6 foot tall? These are mutually exclusive attributes, and so to claim, for example, that a being is both all-knowing and not all-knowing at the same time, we're pointing to an explicit contradiction. And therefore leading to this idea that it's logically irrational. When it comes to miracles, there's no explicit contradiction being put forward. Like if you can say, for example, the laws of logic, or the laws of physics are X, Y, Z. So anything that doesn't do that is illogical. If you're trying to make this kind of argument, then you might be able to put forward the idea that there is a contradiction. But then you've also you're going to have rebuttals to that, i.e., the laws of physics are based on induction. They're based on you're looking at the world, and you're saying something keeps doing this, so therefore it's going to keep doing that. But there's nothing necessary about that, and so therefore there's no necessary contradiction. And so the different approaches here. There's different. They inhabit different categories. And then the other issue is there's two ways of approaching this conversation with regards to miracles. So we can say one kind of argument is to justify your belief because of a miracle, so that the miracle therefore would be like the foundation of your belief. And you say, I've experienced X, and so I'm going to believe, like, for example, I saw Jesus in a dream, so therefore I'm a Christian now. Or, you know, I witnessed something crazy. I saw a jinn, I saw whatever it is. You experience something that you consider to be miraculous, and you use that as the basis for your belief in whatever religion it is you feel is justified by that miracle. And then the other problem is that the other way of approaching it is not having miracles as the linchpin or the reason for your belief in that, but rather as a secondary issue. That is, you've built your belief on a religion with, say for example, you're looking at the Kalam arguments, you're looking at arguments for the oneness of God, you're looking at arguments in favor of the Quran as revelation from God, or the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a prophet. These arguments would be the foundation, and then as a consequence of accepting these, you therefore then have these miracles explicitly stated in the Quran or in the Hadith, and so then you accept them not as the reason for your belief in the first place, but as a consequence of your belief in the scripture, as a consequence of your belief in that particular religion. And so, there's a difference here. So you might, like, for example, there was an article someone sent us recently. I think, Sharif, you read through it as well, possibly, where there's a gentleman, he's arguing that, he's kind of taking Hume a bit further, or a bit more, he's a bit more extreme than Hume, and that he's saying that it's not possible at all for miracles to happen. And the reason is because there's two steps you've got to take, and I can't remember the explicit argument he was giving, but
yeah,
can you recall it?
We'll get onto that, because I just want to really focus on this particular point, though. When you're saying that, look, because people will say, and I know you've covered it a little bit, but I just want to re-emphasize this point.
Yeah.
When you say that if there's an obvious contradiction, a contradictory statement, we can reject. But they will say there is a contradiction between what we know about the facts of the universe and these claims about people walking on water. These are clear, obvious contradictions between what we know externally and what is being claimed in these religious texts.
So that I wouldn't say that that's a contradiction in the sense that, like, you're based, because this would be the black swan fallacy, or something. It might not be that one, but it's a fallacy in the sense that you're saying, I've experienced X every time I've seen it, so therefore all X's must be equivalent to my experience of them. Like, every time I've seen a sheep, it's been a white sheep, therefore all sheep are white. You can't make this generalization. It's a hasty generalization. You can't.
So what you're saying is that the laws of the universe are inductively derived.
Yes.
So we go from specific observation 1, observation 2, observation 3, even 1,000 observations, and then we create a generalized statement. Okay, this is always the true fact of the reality. But we don't know it's always the true fact of the reality because we've not observed everything.
Yeah, and we're not finding out in that exploration everything necessary about what underpins these laws. We're basing it off the experience rather than off the foundation of the thing that gives rise to these laws in the first place. But then that begs the question: well, what is it that's giving rise to these laws? Now, if there is no God, then you've just got this kind of big empty space of questions that we need to answer. And that obviously gives rise to a problem if you're trying to use this in an argument to say that a miracle is necessarily contradictory. It's like, well, no, you can only make that claim if all of this unknown, if all of these unanswered questions had answers to them. Well, by essence of the fact that they're unanswered, we don't know anything about the necessary fundamental elements that give rise to these. We're still exploring this. It might be impossible to actually ever get to the absolute bottom, and we've just got to deal with what's in our horizon. Now, that's on the assumption as well that there is no God and that we're just having to deal with the universe based on our limited perspectives. Now, if there is a God, he's the one that orchestrated the laws as they were in the first place. There's nothing necessary about the laws. He made them in a particular way. He could make them in another way. These are contingent things, you know, that they can exist in many possible ways. There's nothing necessary about them having to be the way they are. And so if the one who made the laws in the first place can, you know, say, for example, that gravity is whatever speed it is, meters per second squared acceleration, then he, you know, if he wanted to, he could change the variables. He could, you know, he could make it other than what it is. And so for that reason, there isn't a necessary contradiction. Now, when you're talking about the nature of God, this is a completely separate sphere. You were talking of two different categories here. We're talking of, you know, what can we say about God and his nature, and what can we say about contingent possibilities?
Let me just really, because we only got a couple of minutes before we want to bring on our first guest. But let me just bring Jake into this. So, Jake, you know, the facts of the universe, can they be violated?
Yeah. So I just want to give an example of what I think the main thrust of the argument is. So we have a miracle on one hand, and we have this other thing called a law of nature on the other hand, right? And the skeptic, or even in the case of the Christian with the Trinity, is saying that the miracle and the law of nature are contradicting one another. So in order to even evaluate that, we have to define the terms, what a miracle is and what a law of nature is, and then we can see whether or not these two things contradict one another. Now, I just want to read a quote from J.L. Mackie, who is no friend to theism. He was an atheist philosopher in the 20th century, in which he says this: what we want to do here is to contrast the order of nature with a possible divine or supernatural intervention. The laws of nature, we must say, describe the ways in which the world, including, of course, human beings, works when left to itself, when not interfered with. A miracle occurs when the world is not left to itself, when something distinct from the natural order as a whole intrudes into it. So what he's saying is the laws of nature describe the way the world is when it's left to its natural phenomenon and the way that the world actually occurs and works. A miracle occurs. Obviously, he doesn't believe in miracles, but he's saying that a miracle would occur from a theist perspective when the natural world is not left to the way it is. And I sort of don't really have an issue with that. Now, the claim is that these laws of nature cannot be violated, and that when God performs a miracle or a prophet or whatever the example is, it would be an example in which these laws of nature are being broken or violated. Now, I want to give an example of a law of nature, which is the first law of thermodynamics, which says that which is basically also called the law of the conservation of energy. It says that energy it states that energy in an isolated system, it remains constant. So we've heard frequently that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And this is what this is talking about, that in an isolated system, the energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only transform from one form to another. Now, a key thing that I want people to understand from this definition of this law of nature is that it refers to isolated systems, so that this law of nature is contingent upon the system being isolated. Now, for people who aren't familiar with this, an isolated system is a system in which energy and matter cannot be exchanged. So there's no causal influence from outside of the system. Now, if we think of our universe as a total system, and the question would be whether or not our system is an isolated system. Because in order for the law to apply, you have to make a further claim that our universe as a whole, or whatever system we're looking at, the earth, whatever it is in fact an isolated system. Well, actually, you can find nowhere in science the claim that our universe is an isolated system. And so because of that, the claim that a miracle would actually conflict with this law, we can't actually make that claim, because if a miracle were to occur, it would be when the system was open. It wouldn't be isolated. What I mean by that is there would be causal influence from outside of the system. Now, if the law and all of scientific laws only apply to or are contingent upon the system being isolated or closed, and if a miracle were to occur, the system would be open, it wouldn't be isolated, then every time a miracle would occur, it couldn't contradict the law of nature because the law of nature doesn't apply in that instance. So my claim is that not only is there no logical contradiction between a miracle and a law of nature, but my claim is there couldn't possibly be one.
So what you're saying in essence is, even if we accept the laws of nature to be fixed, it is like saying we're in a room, and within this particular room, these are the particular laws and regulations.
Yeah.
But that assumes that all that exists and all that exists that has impact upon the room is the room itself. It's closed. But if somebody's outside of the room, they can then influence what occurs within the room and change it up. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there's no, like I said, we have no observable evidence of a ideally isolated system anywhere in the universe. So the claim that our system is, or the universe as a whole, is an isolated system is not a scientific claim. It's a metaphysical claim in which even some theoretical physicists wouldn't make this claim because they give some credence to the possibility of the idea that there could be other universes that could causally influence ours and vice versa. And so if that's the case, well then, if something sort of just dropped into our universe, well, if our universe is not an isolated system, there's no contradiction with the law of conservation of energy, because what we're saying is that this is a law that's contingent upon the system being isolated. And if such an event were to occur as a miracle or even interacting with another universe, the law wouldn't apply because the condition that's needed for the law to apply wouldn't be fulfilled.
Abdul, I don't like calling it Abdul. I prefer Abdul Rahman.
It's fine.
So Abdul Rahman, yeah. So based on what Jake and Yusuf has said, and I know we've only got I'm just going to give you 30 seconds or so, yeah, because I want to bring on Karlos, who's waiting in the background and wants to join us in the discussion. How would you define a miracle then?
I think a miracle is just a break in an observed regularity. I really think that's all it is. But I just want to say something real quick. I know you're just giving me 30 seconds. I think what's important at the outset here in this discussion is to start with a definition of a miracle and a definition of a law of nature that's philosophically useful in the sense that it's not a question-begging definition. So if I say that the laws of nature are necessary connections or necessary connections that follow from certain universal, like there's a universal A and a universal B. Once they instantiate, they are necessarily connected. If I provide that kind of definition, then I am begging the question against miracles. And if I provide a definition of a miracle as in every single act of God, then I'm also begging the question for miracles, because from a theistic perspective, everything is an act of God. So it's important to start with a useful definition of both what a miracle is and what a law of nature is. Otherwise, like a definition that wouldn't really have any kind of bias towards either direction, so that it would give you the chance to actually examine the evidence. And in that sense, I think I think it's just really important to start there. I'll leave it at that for now.
Do you mind if I have 30 seconds as well?
I'll give you 20 seconds.
All right. I'll be as quick as I can. So yeah, I just really want to kind of hone in on what Abdul just said there. That when you look at definitions given by people like Hume, or people that just basically end up arguing towards the conclusion that miracles are not possible, they usually go off this idea of an intervention by God. But as Abdul rightly stated there, we believe that Allah is constantly intervening and sustaining everything at all times. So what that would, by definition, make all of creation, everything, existence itself, a constant miracle. And all what we would refer to as a miracle when they occur, the ones that surprise people, isn't so much something different. It's just the only thing that makes it different is the phenomenological experience of it as amazing. And what it does is it sort of acts as a reminder of God's existence or God's intervention, because it stands out, because it's different. And so again, it's, if you're trying to make it as the active intervention of God, everything's a miracle. And when you experience one, in summary, it's basically a reminder that existence is miraculous for a moment in a particular experience.
I think from just as a quick point for myself, I think
You got
generally
20 seconds.
So normally what I use is a non-naturalistic explanation that a mu'jiza in Arabic would say miraculous event, inimitable event, something that cannot be imitated, has a non-naturalistic explanation or is beyond human productive capacity. If it's like the Quran as an example, I want to bring on Karlos now, because I know he's been patiently waiting in the background. Hopefully, if the admins can let Karlos in. Hi, Karlos. How are you doing?
Good evening.
Good evening. It's good to have you on. I think we spoke a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago, I think it was.
It was this time last week, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. So it's good to have you. I don't know if you want to just give a really quick, short introduction to yourself, where you're from, what you believe.
Yeah, so I've been on a couple of the Muslim debate shows. I do enjoy interlocking with you guys and basically putting my own beliefs to the test against people that are knowledgeable and disagree with me. So as most people that do or have heard me know that I would be classed as an atheist. I don't call myself an atheist. There's obviously a separate discussion on the definition of atheist, but for the most part, I don't believe that there are sufficient reasons to believe in God. That could change, but I don't think there are enough, and I think that's what makes me an atheist. But I'm not a hard atheist in the saying that there are no gods. I don't think I have enough evidence to make that claim. So go for it.
Sorry, Karlos, I was going to ask you. So on this topic of miracles, do you believe miracles are rational? Do you believe they're irrational?
I think it's irrational to believe in anything that there's insufficient evidence for, and I think miracles would fall into that category. Yeah, it depends what obviously you define as a miracle. I know Abdul's just defining it for us there. Because I've never experienced a miracle, or I don't necessarily believe that there's a good enough justification to believe in them. It's not really for me to define. It's really for me to listen to what a person's definition of a miracle is and then go from there, really. But what I would ask on the question of a definition, would you say that a miracle is something that can't be explained by science or hasn't been explained by science, or could be both?
If I can ask Karlos, I'm going to answer that, but because you said that from your perspective, miracles couldn't possibly be proven. I mean, there couldn't be sufficient evidence for miracles that would justify you in believing them. I was wondering if you're saying, because this is an epistemological concern. I was wondering if it's an in principle epistemological concern in the sense that we couldn't possibly have evidence for miracles, or whether it's just an in fact epistemological concern in the sense that we just don't, as it is, have evidence for any miracles.
Well, I'm saying the latter. I'm not making the claim that there are that miracles can't be proven. I don't believe that. I think some miracles can be proven depending on the nature of the claim. But what I'm saying is that there isn't sufficient evidence to justify believing in miracles. So until that changes, it's irrational to believe that miracles exist or are real.
Karlos, do you mind me asking, have you got an example in mind of a particular sort of miracle that if you were to see it, you would accept as a miracle, or that would maybe jog a belief?
Yeah. I mean, for me, science is the best method that we have of understanding reality. So it would probably follow a scientific method. And science, I know I was on the stream last week where we were discussing, can science prove God? And I don't know if anyone saw it, but I made the claim that science can not prove God's existence, but it can assess miracles. If you want an example, my best example would be the splitting of the moon, because we can test the moon. The moon's there. I mean, it's 250,000 miles away, but it's there. It can be tested. It can be examined, and we can rule it out or prove it to be true. So just to sort of take it further, science can investigate the moon. So if we had evidence through science, the methodology of science, to say yes, there is evidence that there was once a split, and we can date it to less than 2,000 years ago, that would serve as good evidence.
Karlos, if I can just chime in there a bit. So you're talking about scientific evidence, and scientific evidence deals with like as like a matter of like methodology. We have to start with definitions, and right now we're going to be dealing with laws of nature when it comes to science, right? Because I think that really should be the focal point here. So what's your understanding of what a law of nature is? Do you have like a rough definition just off the top of your head?
A law of nature is just an explanation of a particular way that reality functions.
Yeah, and what would constitute a break in a law of nature or an irregularity in a law of nature?
Evidence.
So let's like, for example, like if you're taking this on like an inductive basis, so we've observed regularities in the universe, and these regularities are something that don't have a necessary logical connection, but we see A followed by B, and we see that very regularly, and that is sufficient for us to infer that there is some kind of law going on here. Now, if that's your basis for the way you're going to determine that a law of nature, what a law of nature is, and on that basis you're saying that you have that epistemological concern that we have this background knowledge of things occurring in this regulated way. So I think you would have a scientific concern here that once you come up with new evidence, which we do come up with new evidence, scientific evidence every day, you would have to be skeptical of the novel evidence as well, because it's evidence that you haven't observed. So in a sense, it's also a break in some kind of break in a regularity.
Yeah, sure. But you in terms of experience and phenomena, if it's in the realm of the unknown, then you won't reach a conclusion unless you've got good enough reason to reach a conclusion. So obviously, if you see an irregularity in the law of nature, you could posit a supernatural or something external to reality causing it. But because we've not had any evidence of that, you wouldn't reach that as a conclusion, but you would consider it as a possibility, and science doesn't exclude those kinds of possibilities for its methodology.
Can I ask Karlos a question? Because I'm still trying to understand what your view on miracles actually is. Abdul asked you earlier if you think it's an in principle problem or not, and so you're going to the issue that you think that there's not good evidence for miracles as far as you can tell thus far. But I think that's kind of putting the cart before the horse, because what my main concern with this stream is, especially with skeptics, is I want to know if you think that the very concept of a miracle and law of nature contradict. So what is your position on that?
Sorry, say that again.
Does the concept of a miracle, if a miracle were to occur, would that necessarily contradict or break a law of nature?
Again, I don't believe miracles exist, so it's down to what you're claiming a miracle is, and then we'll go from there. Like I said earlier, I don't have a specific definition.
Well, but you just said earlier that you don't think that there's good evidence of miracles, so you had to have some concept of a miracle in mind. And I'm saying,
and I gave you an example. So the moon.
yes,
You believe that's a miracle, yeah? So I'm basically going off of your claim that it's a miracle, and then I'm dealing with that claim in using my epistemology.
Yeah, but what I'm asking though is, okay, let's take the splitting of the moon or any kind of example of a claimed miracle you want to give. Would that necessarily break a law of nature?
No, not necessarily, no.
Why do you say no?
Because it could be part of the unknown natural world that we've yet to discover, because obviously we haven't discovered everything there is to discover about nature. So if there's some...
let's say it wasn't natural.
Sorry?
Let's say it wasn't natural.
How would you tell?
Well, this is the thing. I'm trying to understand from you whether or not you think it's an in-principle problem. And you keep going to the issue of like the evidence for the miracle.
Sure.
So I'm trying to understand from you, because this is my perspective. Atheists will say, hey, you guys believe in miracles. That contradicts laws of nature. Therefore, if the law of nature is true, a miracle cannot occur because it would contradict the law of nature. So I'm wondering if you hold that position or not.
No. So as I said earlier, if something happens that's unknown, is it something that you consider is unexplained by science or unexplainable by science?
Well,
let's say that it was...
Sorry, I mean, this is where we go back to the question begging definitions. Because if you say that, I think what I'm understanding from you, Karlos, is that going back to the whole in principle question, what you're saying is that a miracle should be, at least in principle, verifiable through science. But then if it's verifiable through science, then it's natural. And you've kind of smuggled in the word, I don't mean it in a bad way, I'm just saying you smuggled in the word natural over there. It could be, and there could be a natural explanation that we don't know, and science could possibly explain it, but then we're going to keep going in circles here, because then, again, it's natural. So we don't have a useful definition for what a natural event would be and what a miraculous event would be, because you're saying what a miraculous event, to verify a miraculous event, I have to verify it through science. But if I verify it through science, it's natural. But if it's natural, it's not a miracle. So,
So let me try and explain it a different way. So the way I look at things is in like three separate, tiers or realm. So you have the conceptual, you have the external to what's conceptual, which is nature, reality. And then you could have a third tier or third realm, which would be the supernatural or metaphysical, whatever you want to label it as. So what I'm saying is anything that happens in nature can be argued as natural, or it could be argued as in being in the third tier. But because we are stuck in the second tier in reality, you can only experience things in the second tier. So how would you tell it's not from the second tier and from a third tier?
So that seems like what you're saying is we could, there is an in principle epistemological concern. We don't have the epistemic tools to assess what a miracle is. So it seems like the conversation doesn't even get off the ground, because the way you're defining what a miracle is and the way you're defining what nature is seems to kind of restrain the whole discussion. And you're just begging the question from the very start, is that whatever reasoning I could possibly give you to convince you of a certain miraculous account, at the end of the day, if you're convinced, it's not going to really be a miracle. So it kind of begs the question for naturalism.
There's also... Sorry, go on, Karlos.
Yeah, so my first question was, how can you tell the difference between something that's natural and something that's metaphysical? How can you... What methodology are you using to then come to the conclusion that whatever unknown event that you witnessed or experienced is not from this second tier? What methodology are you actually using? Because if you can't do that, then you're stuck in the second and first tier. And if you're stuck in the second and first tier, basically what science will do is say, if you can't evidence your claim or your belief in the second tier, then we'll relegate your claim to the first tier, and it's just purely conceptual, and therefore it's just imaginary.
Yeah. So if it's inexplicable by nature, basically a miracle would be something that if God didn't intervene, it wouldn't have happened on its own through the laws of nature. But in order for me to determine what that is or whether it's even possible, I have to have a useful definition for what laws of nature are and for what a miracle is. Like, based on that, if we have that as a good starting point, I can tell you something like, for example, the inimitability of the Quran. I mean, I'm not prepared to defend that, but just as an example, if we were to tell you that no human or humans as a whole, if they did gather their resources collectively, they couldn't possibly come up with something like it. Just that claim, on the surface, it is trying to tell you that your natural resources all put together couldn't possibly come up with an explanation for this. If that is true, like if, let's say, literary critics and scholars come together and they do say that yes, this is in fact true, that we couldn't possibly through our natural means come up with something like this, or our epistemic tools that are constrained by within the let's say like the scientific method are incapable of explaining this phenomenon, then we are warranted in saying that, okay, this is a miracle. But you're not going to really accept that, right? Because you're going to say that, no, maybe there's something else that's going to explain it in the future and it's natural.
Sure. Why not?
Carlos, can I just sort of maybe explain a few points? Obviously, I think sometimes what we have to do is we have to sort of there's two issues here. One issue is to do with whether, in principle, can we accept that miracles could potentially occur? So that's one question. Or is that a logical contradiction? The second question would be, is in principle, can we assess the potential that a miracle has occurred? Yeah, and then there's a third one, which is, okay, so how do we know which miracles have occurred and which ones haven't? How do we make that assessment? Going back to the first question, or the foundational question is, we believe that all universal laws are quote unquote acts of God. Yeah, they are, the universe, all contingent realities, has to have a necessary foundation to it. So in origin, there is generally the intervention of God in terms of creating regularity within the universe, yeah, because it's not necessary for things to exist within the universe and have the particular attributes that they exist. The second issue then is that, okay, there is not going to be a violation now if God then changes those laws in a particular way. How do we identify this? Well, we would identify this through prophets. So a prophet would turn around, for example, and say, look at that moon. Will you believe me if it splits? And then he will, what we say, bi'idhnillah, by the permission of God, split the moon or raise the dead or walk on water. He will make that claim to say, I'm going to do X, and he's then going to do X by the permission of God as a miracle and as a sign. That's different to saying, I've just seen an event decontextualized to anybody claiming that this event will occur, and then suddenly it occur, and then me trying to retrospectively explain it. Does that make sense, Carlos? That there is a distinction here, and there is a way to identify it. If somebody turns around and says, tomorrow I'm going to split the moon, and then tomorrow he splits the moon, yeah, and every single test that we do demonstrates that it was split, that would be a miracle, wouldn't it? That's something we could identify.
Yes and no. So again, like, I don't believe in miracles, so I don't think it's rational to believe in them. But if the moon was split and it happened, then science would probably say, okay, we've never experienced this before. We now need to do some further investigation, and they wouldn't say it was a miracle. They wouldn't resort to that as a reasonable conclusion. They would just say, we don't know. We need to do some more work on it.
No, but what I'm saying is this. I'm saying that the universal laws themselves are founded upon a necessary being, upon the creator. Yeah. So the violation aspect is not a problem. It can be violated. The violation of regularity is not just something that occurs randomly or an event that occurs. It occurs because somebody, a human being, said he's going to do this particular act in order to prove that he is a messenger from God. So it's not the case that, we walk in we go to the local river and it splits and we're thinking, what's going on there? It's the case that somebody made a willful intent. That willful intent cannot be from his own productive capacity. So it's beyond
Yeah,
human capability. Yeah.
I get
Because
you
it's
saying.
beyond human capability, and you've identified that this person has, raised a staff or whatever it is and done the act. And I'm not saying, therefore, we believe Moses did a miracle. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying, if we were to see that, we would identify a miracle. It's not the case. We're not going to say, well, there's an epistemic problem here of, in principle, we don't know if a violation is taking place. He's done something that we know, because
Right.
laws are outside of human productive capacity. Natural laws, we can only operate within them. So he's done something that's outside of natural human productive capacity, which violates regularity, which he said he would do, and it did happen.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think the way that science works, it works on in terms of the unknown. Obviously, when it comes to unknown, there could be infinite ways to explain the past data. But if you're making future predictions, so like to your example, if that prediction was made and then it happened, that would actually be very good evidence for what that person claimed. It shows that they understand what they're talking about. They made a prediction that was novel. It's a future prediction. It's testable because we can all see it, we can test it, we can observe it, and it's a prediction that's come true. So that's how science progresses or corrects itself, by making people putting forth hypothesis, and then it has to be in a form of a novel testable prediction. If you meet that criteria, and as your example does do that, that would serve as good evidence for that person, and science would likely not accept maybe the whole claim, but would certainly accept that that person knows what they're talking about, and then they would probably do further investigation from there. So that is, for me, the threshold, is if you can make a claim that meets the scientific criteria of making novel testable predictions, and you can surpass that, that's how science progresses.
But do you get, Karlos, that if you do make a novel testable prediction and it does work, again, we're basically back to the whole idea that it is natural, because novel testable predictions, the reason they work is because they work, based on.
Abdurrahman, I don't think
Sure.
Karlos is necessarily saying that you're looking for a naturalist explanation. I think he's just using the hypothesis is, I'm going to do X. Then we can see that he's done X. Therefore, it's a sign that this person is claiming that he's from God. Is that right, Karlos?
Is that what you're saying?
So
Yeah,
I know Jake
the
wants to
only
jump in as well. So go, Karlos, really quickly,
yeah,
and
so
then I'll let Jake jump in.
the only distinction is that obviously the person making the claim obviously believes a bigger truth, okay, and they've provided one line of evidence to support that to be true. The skeptic or the scientist or whoever who's trying to be convinced would be convinced of the individual act that's been proven, but they may not be convinced of the whole truth, and they may need more lines of evidence, more predictions to be made to basically build up a case. That if you come on a crime scene and you've got just one line of evidence, it might prove that what that person A did that crime, but it's not. It might be circumstantial, or it might not be sufficient evidence to actually go ahead and commit that person to being guilty. So you need multiple lines of evidence to actually, if you're trying to answer a bigger question like, does God exist and did he give me the power to split the moon? That's a separate claim that can't be answered by that one thing, but that one thing does support that claim. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think Jake wants to jump in, because I would want to respond, but I think Jake's been waiting patiently. Jake?
Yeah, because I'm still trying to understand. I think Brother Sharif did a good job of breaking down the three separate issues. And I'm just going to reiterate them, and he can correct me if I'm wrong. The first is a sort of ontological issue that, in principle, a miracle and a law of nature cannot. A miracle would be, by definition, breaking a law of nature. A law of nature can't be broken, therefore it could never happen. That's the first thing. The second thing is the concern, what you were saying earlier, Karlos, about, well, if a miracle did happen, how in the world would we even know that it happened? How would we be able to distinguish that? And then the third question is, well, if we got beyond that and we set up a criteria for which we could know whether or not a miracle did or could happen, and what that would look like, then the third question would be, now we take that criteria, apply it to the miracles that are claimed to happen, and we test them to see whether or not they actually have happened. Now, I want to have this as clear as conversation as we possibly can, because I want to understand what you're saying. And if you're still stuck on the first point, I think it would do a disservice of skipping over points 1 and 2 and moving on to explaining the third point. So
Sure.
I think we have to take it step by step. Do you have a problem with the first step?
So just repeat the first step again for me.
The first step is, do you think there is a sort of ontological problem between a miracle occurring, and by definition, it would break a law of nature, and it can't break a law of nature, therefore a miracle could never happen? Do you have a problem with that first part?
Well, we don't fully understand the laws of nature. So, I think in quantum physics, they're looking at particles that can exist and not exist at the same time, or be in two places at the same time. That would defy our understanding of the laws of nature, or even the laws of logic, A being not A. So maybe our laws of logic only work to a certain extent, and when you go further out, it starts to break down. So kind of like Newton's law of gravity, it's accurate up to a certain point, and then the further out you go, it breaks down, and then you need Einstein's explanation to actually make sense of it. So I don't even know if I necessarily agree with that.
So, Carlos,
Yeah,
you've not really answered Jake's specific.
Yeah, you're not.
Carlos, you're sort of jumping to number 2. He's asking the number 1 question, which is, in principle, is there a violation? Is it logically contradictory to say a miracle can occur, which therefore breaks a law of nature? However we've approached the knowledge of the law of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a distinction between, Karlos, is it logically possible for a miracle to occur? That's different than what your question is. Is it logically possible for us to identify what a miracle would be? Those are two different questions. One is, well, maybe the miracle could happen, but how in the world would we be able to say, okay, this is definitely what the miracle is? And then the first one is a miracle even logically possible? That's the first question we're trying to address.
Okay, so basically we're saying anything's possible.
Well, I don't know. I mean, do you think it is possible? That's my question.
Do I think it's possible?
Do you think it's logically possible based on the classical laws?
Yeah, look, why not? Yeah, anything. We don't understand everything, so on that basis, it's not logical. There's a possibility, for a miracle to occur.
Okay, so it's logically possible. So we got rid of the first step. Now moving on to the second step, which I think is your primary concern, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Your primary concern is that if a supposed miracle did happen, how in the world would we be able to differentiate between that miracle and something that was either natural and just we didn't know how to explain it yet? I think that's what your primary concern is, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm done questioning with you as far as we go, because I just wanted to get clear on, okay, let's take this first step, because you have to understand a lot of skeptics and atheists will get so hung up on the first step. And I feel that theists a lot of times will try to show examples of a miracle when it's like, no, we have to go back to the beginning because they're saying there's an in-principle logical contradiction. So now I think that we've settled that. I don't know if any of the brothers want to address the second stage.
Yeah, so I don't know if, obviously I don't know if Yusuf and Abdurrahman want to jump in as well, but I was just going to say, look, when we identify a miracle, see, this discussion about miracle, the first question, which obviously you agree with, that there's no logical problems, means that we cannot say that a religion or a claim to guidance from God is irrational just because it affirms certain miraculous events. Yeah, so we can't use that as a way to critique and dismiss a religious claim. Doesn't mean that we believe automatically that the miracle is true. We just can't say that it's internally contradictory to affirm that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when we look at this question about, is there an in-principle problem of identifying? It presupposes that we believe, and we've proven the existence of a creator, the existence of a necessary being, yeah? Because that allows us to understand that there are regularities within the universe, and those regularities are imposed upon the universe. Now, this is a problem for atheists, yeah? I know I'm sort of slightly going around it, but I think we do need to sort of go around this, address this particular issue, which is, how do we ensure, from an atheistic point of view, that there are even laws, there are even, regularities or patterns within the universe? Because as an atheist, you would have to say there is nothing that grounds regularity within the universe, that literally anything possible could potentially happen. Do you see that that's a problem, Karlos?
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, everything's grounded in reality, but we don't understand everything that there is about reality. So, from my perspective, anything.
Do you believe the foundation of reality is understandable?
Is the foundation of yeah?
Is
Why not?
explainable? Yeah, understandable, explainable.
To an approximation, yeah.
Yeah. So do you believe that if the foundations of reality, of contingent beings, yeah, so contingent beings are basically things that could exist, could not exist, could exist in different ways than they are,
Yeah.
possible beings, that if it's not ultimately explainable, then nothing is explainable? Because if you can say that a contingent being just pops into existence for no explanation, and therefore the foundation of reality ultimately allows for things to come into existence without any explanation, then there is no explanation for anything. Does that make sense?
No, because like reality is reality, so it can't not be reality just by the laws of logic. So everything that happens within reality is part of reality by definition. Yeah.
But that's just a tautology, right,
Yeah.
Karlos? I mean, you're not really saying much.
Yeah, I mean, reality is reality on the existence of God too. I mean, God is God. Reality is reality. It doesn't really. It's not. I mean, I'm not trying to. It's just not very, very useful. We're trying to explain the ultimate nature of reality. Of course, reality is reality, but
Sure.
we're trying to explain what really accounts for that reality.
Yeah.
But
So, for example, look,
go
what some people say, Karlos, is there can be things that exist which have no explanation. And we would say, yes, there can be, but only thing that exists without an external explanation would be a necessary being. Yeah. So the necessary being
okay.
becomes the foundation to explain all other non-necessary things within the universe.
Okay, but are there any other possibilities to that?
No, there is no other possibilities, because existence, those two types of existence, there will be a necessary existence and there'll be a non-necessary or contingent existence. Those are the two camps that we have.
But no,
So
but
it's
you
either
also
going to
mentioned
be necessary or it's going to be not necessary. It's either going to be limited or quote unquote unlimited.
Well, I agree with that. That it can either it's going to be necessary. There has to be some necessary existence. But you then went on to say that it has to be a being as the
No,
foundation.
well, when we say yes, so when we say being, we're just using the word as in that which exists. Yeah.
right,
So we're saying
okay.
there is a necessary foundation to reality that provides an explanation for all contingent things. Yeah.
Right, but
Now,
what if reality
yeah,
is
go on.
the foundation? That's the argument I'm making. What if reality itself is the foundation?
Yeah, but we have to
Existence itself.
define what reality is.
The question is like, so is reality descriptive, or is it a thing in and of itself? Like, are you talking from, say, like a pantheistic sense there? That because we kind of touched on this when we were having a discussion about the arguments for a necessary existence. Like, we made mention of the fact where you have the set of all contingent things. Is saying reality itself, putting it into context with regards to this argument, when you say reality itself could be the necessary existence, are you saying that the set of all contingent things is the necessary existence, or are you referring to reality in a way other than this sort of a pantheistic idea?
So reality, when I refer to reality, I'm just talking about existence itself. So existence itself is the necessary, or could be the necessary thing, or the foundation.
Carlos, let's try and define it specifically. If I turn around and I say what I sense, the reality, quote unquote, I live in, is the sum of all finite things. Would you agree with that?
Is that what you're saying existence is? Or are you talking about existence as something separate from the sum of all things?
Sum of all contingent beings.
Separate.
So when you say existence itself is the foundation, you're not saying that by the word existence, you mean all existing things.
No.
Right. But then this is a problem, because now what you're referring to is a description of the way something can exist. But you're talking about it as though it's a thing in and of itself, which then leads to this idea of it being a distinct, necessary being that isn't the sum of all contingent things, which ends up sounding a little bit like what we were talking about when we were talking about God. But instead of calling it God, you're just calling it existence. But then you're conflating the idea of a necessary being with this descriptive idea of existence.
Yeah, Carlos, what do you mean by reality? Because you're saying it's not the sum of all contingent beings. You're saying you have the sum of all contingent beings on one hand, and then you have something called X, which you're going to call reality on the other hand. And X is the cause of the sum of all contingent beings. Is that how you're understanding reality?
Well, reality is, I suppose, the only other word I could use for it is just a generic nature. So it could be the laws of nature and the way that nature functions. That might be the necessary existence.
But wouldn't you agree that laws of nature are contingent things as well? They're not necessary. They could be another way.
Yeah, but I'm just giving you possibilities. That's all.
Yeah. But the issue is that, like, you're pointing at things. Like, did you get my criticism with regards to you're using the word existence in its descriptive sense to then talk about it with regards to as it's itself some sort of distinct being? Because you were using it 1 minute. Because you were using it 1 minute, you were saying, what if existence is itself the necessary thing? So, but the problem is when we're talking about like something existing, we're talking about a quality of a thing. Like if this phone exists, you know, it's a descriptive element. The fact that it exists isn't a separate entity, separate from this. It's a way of describing this thing. Yeah. And if it doesn't exist, if I throw it into a volcano and it ceases to exist, we say it lacks existence. This isn't to talk about existence as an entity with independent existence.
Yeah.
this is a descriptive term. Like, you know, if you call something red, oh, that's a red book, that's a yellow book. You know, this person's tall, this person's
Can I
short.
say something to Carlos? I'm worried. Just Carlos, if we're just if there are too many people jumping in here and you feel like you're getting ganged up on, please
No,
do let us
no,
know.
not at
That's
all.
not
No,
the
I
intent.
think we might be diverting a little bit from the topic of the
Yeah,
show.
exactly.
But
That's precisely what I
The
wanted.
reason, no,
to
but the reason why, Carlos, are sort of slightly, and I did say it was maybe a slight diversion, is because if you understand that the sum of contingent beings, yeah, and we need to really define and get down to what we mean by contingent. So contingent basically means it's not synonymous with dependent. Dependency is the conclusion of contingency. Contingency basically means its explanation of why it exists the way it does is not self-contained. Like when we say a red triangle, the fact that the triangle is red is not contained in the existence of a triangle. Yeah. Whereas if we turn around and say a triangle has three sides, we say, well, that's existent within the very definition of what a triangle is. Yeah. So when we identify something is not necessary to its own existence, like laws of the universe, yeah, or laws of nature, or bodies that exist within nature, or energy, yeah, E equals mc squared. Why can't it be E equals mc cubed? Yeah. All of these things are contingent realities, Carlos. And because they're contingent realities, that's why I asked the first question. Do all contingent realities, is there a necessary explanation that grounds them? And if there is, then there is a necessary being for it. Otherwise, the opposite of that would be to say that things that exist but don't have an explanation as to why they exist, even in and of themselves, just do by some sort of magic, non-explanation. So the foundation of reality is not explainable. Whereas I think we agree the foundation of reality has to be explainable, and the only explanation would be from a necessary and not another type of contingent being.
yeah, but I just don't think you can come to any reasonable conclusion, because if you go back to what I was saying before about the three tiers, like what you're talking about is something that lies in the third tier, what I would refer to as, the fundamental nature of reality, or truth with a capital T, just ontological truths. That's in that third tier. And in order to come to any reasonable conclusion on what the answer to that is, you need evidence from that third tier.
Yeah, no.
Carlos,
But it's Carl. Yeah, so really quickly, sorry, Carlos. I think we can agree that there's a necessary foundation to reality, whether you believe it's a conscious being or not. In essence, what we are agreeing upon is that the reason why contingent beings behave the way that they do, the reason why we have the laws of nature the way they are, is because this necessary existence or necessary foundation, this necessary X, as we're going to call it, is the thing that's causing this. It's not us. It's not the nature of the thing itself, contingent things. It's not nature that's causing its own, rules and laws and regulations. It's rather this necessary X that's causing it. Now, if the necessary X, if a person turns around and says to you, I am going to make a change to contingent realities, yeah? And the reason why I'm going to do that is because necessary X, who defines that contingent reality, will allow me to make this change. And then this person does the action. You're now identifying that that person has done something which has a non-contingent or non-naturalistic explanation, meaning it's beyond the contingent thing. And the only explanation then would be is that this person has got a violation, if you want to call it, of regularity, or a non-naturalistic or beyond human productive capacity, and therefore it must be from the necessary being or necessary X.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
That's not unreasonable.
And
I said, that type of prediction would serve as good evidence for the claim being made.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
just so we don't
one thing is really important as well, Carlos, is as Muslims, we don't just believe that prophets came with like some, strange, extraordinary event. We believe that the miracle that they brought was a miracle that the people could testify to, they could understand because they knew what was within human productive capacity and the knowledge levels at that time. And the prophets brought numerous examples to demonstrate that miracle. So it wasn't just one off. The prophets would say, I'm going to do X to prove that I'm a prophet. And then the people could assess it. And then he would say, I'm now going to re-emphasize this point. I'm going to prove another miraculous, non-naturalistic explanation event that's going to take place. And then he would do it, bi'idhnillah, by the permission of God. And then people could recognize it. So therefore, there was clearly, repetition and a challenge to a people who could recognize that this event cannot be within human productive capacity or cannot be explained by naturalistic explanations as they understood the regularity at that time.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, as I say, I gave Yusuf an example of the moon and how science can actually it falls in the purview of science because it's a supernatural claim about something in the natural world, the moon. So if we
but Karlos, the moon could have. I don't base my faith in Islam because the moon split.
I'm not claiming
or the
that.
reports about the moon split. I don't base my faith in Islam upon.
Sorry, so I'm not claiming that. I'm just referring to the claim itself. So anything that branches off of that is neither here nor there. We're just dealing with the claim itself. So on the basis of a moon being split, if science studied the moon and found that it was once split in the way that you understand it, in the way that it, obviously it was predicted to you. So if that was proved,
are you trying to say, Karlos, we got powerful telescopes and we're going to try and see the crack in the moon? And if we can see the crack in the moon, therefore that's evidence that it could have split.
I'm not saying that we do or don't have the technology, because we obviously have studied the moon. We know what it consists of. We can test those kind of things with, I think, was it the same kind of things that you can test earthquakes for? But to be honest, like whether we have the technology or not, the point I'm making is that because the moon exists in the natural world, it can be tested by science, and your claim can be proven true through a methodological way.
What if the moon was split and put back together so that you didn't see a crack?
Yeah, that's still within the realm.
That'd be very, that doesn't change my argument, but I mean,
it does, because you wouldn't be able to investigate it, meaning that it was for the people at that time to witness it.
Yeah,
and that our faith is not based upon that.
Yeah, it's slightly annoying for the empiricist that needs something like this in order to believe. But like for example, as Sheriff was saying, we've come to believe this independently. So whether or not, like, even if you went to the moon and scoured every square inch of it and couldn't find a crack, that wouldn't affect my faith in Islam.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be bothered because of the fact that it's still possible that miracle was done in such a way so that the moon was split and then put back together so that it was in the same condition it was prior to the splitting. That's still like.
Can I say something to Karlos? Because I think we've gotten I think what Brother Sharif established here is that I think what he was trying to establish, if I get him right, if I understand what he was saying, is that the laws of nature are contingent upon the necessary being, and by being we don't necessarily mean something that is conscious, as he explained. So there's a necessary act.
Although obviously we believe in a conscious being, but
we of course.
Yeah,
so
you're gonna get someone in the comments.
For the sake of the argument.
Yeah, for the sake of the argument. So we believe in a necessary X. The laws of nature are contingent on the necessary X. So depending on what the necessary X does or causes, that's going to reflect in the laws of nature. But I think there's a deeper point here, because we don't want to get too off track. And this is, I think, where Brother Colin's criticism actually comes in, right? I think the more foundational, if I could just explain to you.
What I was going to say, I just need to switch my headphones because I'm going to go on mute. Keep talking. I'm just going to go on mute for a second.
Okay. So the basic point here, I think, should be this: that your assessment of a miracle is going to depend on your worldview and how you choose to assess these events or these claims. It's going to depend on your prior commitments, and the questions, these questions about the fundamental nature of reality, are significant because they directly influence how you're going to look at these miracles. And if I like to give you a simple thought experiment, if you were if you were able to teleport outside of space-time and see this necessary thing, and you witnessed God in all his glory, and you were able to reach like 100% certainty about the existence of God and the omnipotence of God and his creative capacity, and you came back here on Earth and you heard about this flying horse, you wouldn't necessarily believe in it, but it wouldn't be that far-fetched, because you already believe in a creative agent who has the capacity to do whatever he wants to do. So the point I'm trying to make here is that within that worldview, if you do believe in God, in the thought experiment, obviously you're 100% certain. But bringing that back to reality, if we can be rationally justified in our belief in an omnipotent being, then these reports, it doesn't make them believable or rational. It doesn't make us rationally justified to believe in any claim about a flying horse or a talking snake or whatever, but it does make these claims less far-fetched in the sense that that's not a big deal. And that's why, from within an Islamic perspective, and this is where I'm going back to what you said, Karlos, about that miraculous event happening. If the guy predicted he's going to do X and then he does X, it would verify this particular event, and you would be justifying that this spooky thing happened, but it wouldn't necessarily verify his other claims. I totally agree with you. From within an Islamic paradigm, a miracle isn't something that on its own proves the religion. There could be several miraculous accounts or several strange things that happen in the world, and we would just say they're unexplainable. Miracles, in this strict sense of the word, are a more peripheral thing that are a byproduct of your belief in the religion. For example, if we were to talk about the miraculous accounts that are reported to have happened with Jesus, Prophet Isa, from a Christian perspective, and let's grant that he rose from the dead, he did all these miracles he did, and he made all the claims that the Christians think he made. That wouldn't make me believe that he is, astaghfirullah, the Son of God, right? Why? Because miracles have to be assessed within the overall theology that's being presented. And if the theology that is being presented is incoherent and is not in line with with the reason that helps us arrive at the existence of God and gives us a rational basis to believe in God, then the miracles aren't going to do much work, because, as you said, it could just be an unexplainable irregularity, or it can just be a one-time thing that doesn't justify the overall claims of the person. So just in principle, I think, Karlos, if you can understand this, it would be very helpful. At least we can reach some common ground. You can see that, at least from within our perspective, there is no inconsistency in belief in miracles, because we believe we are rationally justified in our belief in an omnipotent creator, and we believe that our religion is perfectly in line with the rational basis of our belief in God. Therefore, we have more of a cumulative case that takes us to the truth of Islam, and these miracles are more of a peripheral thing that just come along with it. Like, if I were to see an image right now in the sky of, let's say, a Hindu god telling me, hey, I'm the true God, I would not believe that, because it doesn't comport to the rational basis of my belief in God. So I think that's...
Does that make sense, Carlos? Because what Abdurrahman is saying we approach a very systematic way of our belief. So as Muslims, what we tend to do is we ask the first question: why is it important to have belief, any belief, whether secular or religious? Then we ask the next question: is what is the nature of reality? Is there a creator or not? And then once we establish that there's a creator that exists, then the next question, with the conscious, has a will and intentionality to create. Then the next question is, well, what is it that the creator wants from me? Yeah, how do I know that? well, people claim to have a message or communication. And so then I start to test whether that message that they have concords with the rational understanding that there must be a creator, a singular creator. And also, in addition to that, we believe that they bring a sign or a miraculous event which is beyond human productive capacity and has no naturalistic explanation for why it came about. We then use that as a way to substantiate this person's claim. So we have this process that we go towards. I don't know if that makes sense, Carlos.
Yeah, can you still hear me?
Yeah, can hear you. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. From Abdul, yeah. I think, if atheists come along and say, where is your evidence for God, and then you give one example of why you believe what you believe, normally the atheists will say, well, that's not convincing enough. And obviously, I think it's a fault on the part of the atheist, because, like I said before, you need multiple lines of evidence to answer big questions like the existence of God. So if an atheist thinks that you believe it on a whim or on one line of evidence, and I think that's the wrong way to go about things. So, the fact that you're saying that you have other reasons for why you believe it's rational, then I would expect that, and I myself would want to investigate each line of evidence that you have on its own merits. And when I gave the example of the moon, that is me examining it on its own merits, regardless of what the answer is to the bigger question. You just go through the claims one by one. Can you prove it to be true, or is it reasonable to be true? And then you move on to the next, and you go through
Yeah.
a systematic way of
See,
ruling them out or
yeah.
approving them. And this,
See, Carlos, for us, and just so you're really clear about this, we believe there's like two types of miracles, if you want to say, or two types of signs. One which is time and place specific, and one which is universal. Now, things like what Isa alayhi salam did, or Prophet Musa alayhi salam did, or what occurred within the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like like the night journey, as an example. Yeah, these are time and place specific. So they may be a sign for those people who were able to witness it, sense the reality there and then. But they're not necessarily evidence for us per se. Yeah, we still have, because there's no way we're going to be able to assess whether the moon split or not. There's no scientific investigation, no telescopes, because as Jake mentioned, it could be the case that God put it back together in a way where there's no sign that it split in the first place. So what we do is we investigate the Quran, because we say the Quran was a mu'jiza, a miraculous event, which was beyond human productive capacity, something that we can sense today, something that we can test and observe and try to challenge for ourselves whether it's within human productive capacity. There's numerous ways of arguing this, obviously beyond maybe this particular stream. But yeah, I don't
Can
know
I
if
add something to that?
yeah,
About
bro, go
the
on.
because the what I was saying earlier, Carlos, about the other line of reasoning, or the rational foundation for belief in Islam, which is prior to these miracles. That rational foundation doesn't necessarily have to be miraculous in the traditional understanding of the word. And this is where we go back to the definition of miraculous, because there's a different usage of what miraculous really, of what the word miracle can really refer to within an Islamic context. And the word in the Quran that's used is normally sign. I think it's used more than miracle. And the word sign, which is equally used to these miraculous events that we're speaking about here, which are irregularities in a chain of causation or in nature, and it's also used in a sense that in reference to nature as a whole. So obviously, if we were to use that definition, it would be a question-begging definition. But from that other understanding, the fact that anything exists at all is a sign to point to God, and that's basically what we do, and what we the basic understanding we utilize in these contingency arguments, generally in cosmological arguments, when we point to the observable world as a sign, and we make an inference to the unobservable God. I mean, obviously the line of reasoning is very nuanced, but that's the general idea. So this foundation upon which we build our belief in Islam doesn't necessarily have to be miraculous in that sense. It's a rational foundation, because we believe that if we can rationally arrive at the existence of this necessary being, he gave us these rational faculties. Our rational faculties should directly lead to him. So if this line of reasoning that we use to arrive at God is in correspondence with the teachings of Islam, with the core doctrines of Islam, then that is sufficient reason for us to accept it as a true revelation from God. And based on that, you can add other building blocks and get to the other issues of miracles. But the point here is that within this broader context, believing in miracles really isn't irrational. It's actually more of a trivial issue from a generally theistic, or more specifically an Islamic perspective, because for Christians, I think they refer to the miracles that Jesus did as something that is kind of proof of the soundness of their theology, which I think we would just reject.
Do you mind if I ask a question, Karlos? So you know the story about Moses alayhi salam and him approaching the Pharaoh. Can I ask you, would you consider the Pharaoh to have been a rational actor or an irrational actor? So he's been approached by Moses, who's been known to be a particular kind of person. He warns him, listen, there's going to be a number of plagues occurring, and then one after the other, they keep happening. He keeps coming back. He performs miracles in front of him. So he turns his staff into a snake, and he pulls his hand out from his cloak, and it shines as light. And then obviously you've got the plagues occurring, and you've just got this guy who keeps going away, keeps coming back, keeps saying, listen, this is going to happen. You need to start listening to me. And, he's a reasonable man. He talks politely. He walks away. He keeps coming back. Do you think that the Pharaoh was justified in being, I don't even know if we'd call him skeptical, from our own tradition. We say it wasn't even that he was skeptical. It was that he was arrogant. So the truth was apparent to him. He just couldn't accept it. But kind of dismissing that element, would you say that the Pharaoh was a rational actor or irrational? Would you see yourself acting in the same way as the Pharaoh, insofar as you dismiss Moses as a prophet and dismiss the idea of God, despite all of the signs that were being given to him?
Based on, yeah. So I mean, no is the short answer.
No, he's not rational. Okay.
So yeah, no, he's not being rational in denying when Moses keeps making predictions and proving them to be true. In reality, to then deny reality is irrational.
So if you were the Pharaoh, would you have been like Allahu Akbar, or would you have remained atheistic?
No, I would have just taken him seriously. So
Okay.
I would not necessarily. I'd still withhold belief in the overall question of what God's existence or what have you. But in the fact that he makes a claim, he comes back, it happens. He makes another claim, it comes back. All of those things that are happening in reality, and I accept reality for what it is. Those are the things that are real, and if those things are being predicted and then happening in reality, if you deny reality, I would say that's irrational to do that.
Okay, so
sorry, Yusuf, you know what it is? I think we've taken up Karlos's time quite a lot, and I think there is somebody waiting.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to just quickly. Sorry,
can
Karlos.
I just ask you one quick question?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Karlos.
You can ask Yusuf. Go on.
Sorry, yeah, it was just one question I wanted to ask myself. So, why do you think that miracles no longer happen in our present time, and why do you think it was isolated to the people of that time?
We believe the Quran is a miracle, Karlos. Yeah. Literally a miracle. It's beyond human productive capacity. Any human being can actually go and try. The Quran challenges human beings, says if you don't believe that the Quran is from God, produce a surah, a chapter like it. The shortest chapter is 3 sentences long. All we have to do in order to demonstrate the falsity of the Quran is to produce 3 sentences similar to the genre, which is the musicality, if you want to use the style of the Quran, and at the level of the rhetoric, the balagha of the Quran too. So we believe that, or you could even weaken. So if you say a verse of Quran could have been, out of the 7,000 or so verses, that a verse of Quran, a particular word could have been replaced with another synonym, which would have made it better, or demonstrated that the syntax was incorrect. The word ordering, it could have been ordered in another way. That this is that if you're able to do that, you'd be able to demonstrate that the Quran was not inimitable. It's something within human productive capacity. So that's the answer.
And another point as well, we do believe that there are going to be miracles as well. So we don't believe they're going to stop completely. So when the Antichrist arrives, one of the key points of being able to recognize him is that he's going to be performing specific kinds of miracles. He's going to bring people. One of them, I think, off the top of my head, someone's going to get chopped in half, and he's going to bring them back together. He's going to bring people that have been passed, or it's going to make it seem like people who have passed away. He's going to bring them forward so people can talk to them like dead relatives. There's going to be a number of things occurring which we would consider miraculous. So they will occur.
There are prophecies as well, right? Like that have already occurred. I think Brother Abu Zakaria's channel has some very good videos about
so the only
prophecies that have already occurred, claims about history that are unique to the Quran. I'd advise you to check out Brother Abu Zakaria's channel. I'm not sure what the channel's.
One message, I think it is something.
Many
like
prophets,
one message. That's
message.
Yeah.
Amazing channel that deals with many of these things.
So in essence, you have the Quran. Sorry, Karlos, go and carry on. Sorry.
Yeah,
we've got 2 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up, and then obviously not too much. It'll take time, but go ahead, Karlos.
Yeah, because my question is, why don't we see miracles today? I mean, you've talked about miracles potentially happening in the future, and the miracle of the Quran, which happened at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So it doesn't really answer my question. I'm asking, why don't we see miracles today?
It's a living miracle, though. It's a living miracle. It's an ongoing miracle that is different than any other religious claim.
And I would also say that, like I mentioned at the beginning, everything is a miracle. Why is there existence? I consider all things miraculous. And the another point is that what you're specifically saying is, why haven't you experienced the miracle? And that's not to say that you won't. You may very well do.
Yeah, Karlos, there was one. He's quite a relatively famous Muslim scholar who was a convert to Islam, and he heard about this Quranic challenge. He heard about the fact that the Quran claims to be a miracle. So if we understand a miracle as being beyond human productive capacity, or in other words, has a non-naturalist explanation, then the Quran claimed to be beyond human productive capacity and doesn't have any naturalist explanation. So he heard about this, and he actually went and studied Arabic in order to say, well, look, let me try and assess whether this really is beyond human productive capacity. Can I challenge it? Could I weaken it? Could I produce 3 sentences similar to it? And he went and he engaged in this process, and he was unable to do it, and he actually converted to Islam. So to say that why don't we witness miracle? That's the whole reason why we have why we believe the Quran. Now, some people might say, well, yeah, but how can language be a miracle? Well, what you find about Moses, which you said if you lived at that time, you would have accepted him as doing miraculous events and therefore a sign from God, is that those were generally visual miracles. They were things that you could see, sense through your eyesight. With the Quran, it's an auditory miracle. It's something that you sense through another sense organ, which is your ear. You're able to assess, its particular genre, its particular rhetoric that it's using, how it's constructing language, its word ordering, word choice, other features, linguistic features within the Quran that you can sense through listening to it or reading it off the page through your eyesight. And then you can investigate, test it, and try to challenge it to see whether you can produce something like it. So I think it fits within what we describe as a miracle, beyond human productive capacity and a challenge.
Just to end with this very quick, to make the weaker claim that it's not as if what we're claiming, Karlos, is that you have to go out and investigate these things yourself in order to become a Muslim. That's actually the entire point, is that what these miracles are kind of like attached to is a rational foundation that can be assessed through reason. So what we're saying is that even the weaker claim that you can become a Muslim on the basis that not Islam is entirely miraculous in the sense that you have like visual and auditory miracles that you can verify right this instant, but in the sense that it comports with your rational assessment of the world. Let's say it does, and on that basis, that is sufficient reason for you to accept miracles. And we can answer the question of the stream here: is it irrational to believe in miracles? Well, if you have a rational basis for believing in Islam, that it would not be irrational to believe in the miracles that Islam reports.
Cool. Karlos, I don't know if you've got any final quick points before, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully you'll come on again in future podcasts as well. It'd be excellent to have you on.
Yeah, no, I love speaking with you guys, man. It's good knowledge. So what I'd say for me, like my own purpose in life is to believe as many true things as possible and rid myself of any false beliefs that I have, challenge any existing beliefs that I have, and listen to new perspectives. And I think that we need to have a filter, a good enough way, a mechanism of filtering out all of the things that shouldn't be believed. And it's an ongoing process. But no, I appreciate the time that you've taken to speak with me and answer my questions. And I'll listen to the rest of the stream. Thank you.
Appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on again.
Yeah. So
take care, guys. Have a good night.
You too, bro.
Thank you, Karlos. So just as another point, hopefully Karlos is also listening, and it was a really good question that Yusuf mentioned, which was, if you saw the signs at Moses' time, Musa alayhi salam's time, would you accept it as miracle? And what was really interesting is that when the challenge, the stick that turned into a snake, Pharaoh said, oh, that's within human productive capacity. Magicians can do the same thing. Our magicians can do the same thing. And for an ordinary layperson, it may be very difficult to assess between what is quote unquote magicians, and what human beings can do, and what is actually a miracle, a mu'jiza. So what happened was, we found that the Quranic narrative talks about. Sorry, Justin's distracting me. The Quranic narrative explains how on a particular day, we had the magicians were brought before all of the people in order to test the particular claim. And the magicians were the first ones to believe in the miracle of Musa alayhi salam. They were the experts. They knew what was within human productive capacity, and therefore they're able to assess. In the same way, we have experts in the Arabic language who can assess whether the Quran was within human productive capacity or whether it wasn't. And so, in a way, we can affirm the fact that if the expertise say that this is outside of human productive capacity, this is outside of human knowledge capabilities, then we can accept that. Justin, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
salam. How you doing, bro?
How's things, Justin? Justin, we're talking about miracles.
Yeah. I heard. I was in the chat arguing with Cyrus. Kind of went off subject, but people told me jump on, so I jumped on.
So, what's your views? Is miracles irrational?
Well, the other night I heard Jake define what he believes as miracles and how it is impossible for miracles to actually contradict the laws of nature, and I am in complete agreement with that. Now, the other way, the way that other people would define miracles is some supernatural, magical, something that happens that's outside of the realms of possibility or probability. I dismiss that. which I think you guys would too.
Yeah. Well, Karlos, I mean, this is a point I want to bring up, is that Karlos agreed with us that the sort of ontological problem of a logical contradiction between a miracle on the one hand and a law of nature on the other, he agreed that for him, it's not a logical impossibility for a miracle to occur. And this is something I want to point out, because when we talked about the Trinity the last time, and the first guest brought up the issue of miracles and was saying, well, you believe in these things which are irrational. And this is something I've heard plenty other times, so I'm not just picking on this one guy because I've heard it on the other chats. Well, you guys believe in miracles which are illogical, and we believe in the Trinity, so what's your point, is basically what they would say. And I think we tried to establish at minimum that they're not analogous. Now, that doesn't mean that we necessarily proved in this stream specific miracles. We introduced a couple, and people can go research them. But the main point was, at minimum, to establish that the concept of miracles is not inherently a logical impossibility. And therefore, if we were successful in doing that, the claim that miracles are analogous to the Trinity fails, and we still are on firm ground to deny the Trinity, because it is, from our perspective, and this is what I argue for, a logical impossibility, and therefore is not the same as a miracle. So I just wanted to make that point, because I think it's something that we needed to make clear given the last stream and that attempted analogy.
Yeah, and just to read out this comment as well, that Call to Truth has put, I've got it on the screen here. So there is no need for the theist to investigate the means by which God split the moon. This is because the theist realizes that every event in the natural world is a creation of God. So this kind of touches again on that point, that everything, by the definition of, an intervention of God, would fall under this idea of the miracle. And I guess that's kind of one of the things that sort of ended up leading me towards a religion in general, was just this this sense of the miraculous nature of existence itself. It always ended up striking me in awe, and I ended up being unable to deny the existence of a God, because everything just screamed out to me as
From a naturalist perspective, Yusuf, that's gonna sound like question begging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because if the discussion is about how we can be rational in believing about certain miracles, I think the question is basically asking is how we can verify miracles. And if you're saying that, well, everything is a miracle, then
definitely.
Yeah.
It's more.
They
it ties to the wisdom of God and things like that. So it's like things have the inherent structure of something that appears to have been created by wisdom, not of random chance. So when you're looking at the human body, for example, you see like robots, and like you look at it, you wouldn't see like as complicated as they are and say of that, oh well, this was created randomly over a long period of time. Whereas you look at the human body, you look at any living structure, and the complex nature of it is.
Do you guys believe, like a lot of the times people will like win the lottery and they'll be like, it's a miracle. Do you guys actually like believe that could even be a miracle?
No.
So would you just are miracles probable?
No, they're logically possible.
Probable in what sense? Yeah. I mean, the prior probability of any miraculous event is very low. I mean, that's why, because just because I'm a theist, but if someone comes to me right now and says there's a flying horse right outside the house, I'm not going to believe him, because the prior probability, which is the probability of something being true prior to investigating the evidence of miracles, is very low. I mean, it should be. That's the point of it being a miracle. If it was very believable, it would kind of defeat the purpose of a miracle.
The reason I ask, and when it comes to that probability, is I started reading a book. It's called the Probability of God, something like that. How they use mathematics to prove that God exists. I think it's a Christian book. But the very first sentence of the book states that before you get done reading this sentence right now, there is a probability that a Mediterranean donkey is going to basically kick you in the face, is basically going to come out of nowhere. And there's a probability that that's going to happen. So why I mentioned the whole lottery thing is that what method do you guys use to differentiate one probable thing from another probable thing?
Thing is, Justin, is that we don't. This is why I asked the original question to Karlos a while ago now, which is that is the foundation of reality explainable or unexplainable? If we believe that the foundation of reality is explainable, i.e., contingent things have an explanation for their existence, then this idea of probability, or chance, goes out of the window in that context. There is nothing that just simply happens with no explanation, which
I
would
would
be
simply
chance.
just disagree with the question, basically trying to break down reality and describe the fundamentals. What the fundamentals of reality. Reality is the fundamental. Reality. I would agree with most of what Karlos was saying, as in reality is the causal principle. Reality is the uncaused cause, the eternal, transcendent, omnipresent existence itself. Reality is that. That is equivalent to God. And what creation is to God, experience, space, time, and matter is equivalent to creation when it comes to reality and God.
But how would you define reality, though? What do you mean by reality?
Reality is where we get our experiences from. Reality is the foundation.
Do not say reality is reality, please.
No, I never
really
do.
annoys me.
For some reason, I never say that, and the theist always goes right to, well, he said reality is real. I've never, ever said that.
Oh, yeah.
So
But
reality,
just we already kind of went over that a little bit before with the last guest, Karlos.
Yeah,
I guess the point is, Justin, the theist believes in a reality. You believe in a reality too. So the label reality is quite meaningless. I mean, we're talking about what the nature of reality is. If you're saying reality is what, well, we agree.
Well, we could get into a conversation about what makes God. Like, what are the compartmentalization? Like, what contains what God is? And
what contains what your reality is.
We're like, we can't break this down anymore. We're already at the most fundamental level. So it would be irrelevant for me to keep asking you questions about what makes up that or what makes up that. So that's what I'm saying with reality. There is no more breaking it down. That is it.
Are you saying that you're agnostic about what reality is? It could be God, it could be otherwise, and reality.
I could be totally wrong. You guys could be right.
No, but it's not that you're right or wrong. It's that you're not really making a positive claim, because the word reality isn't really useful, as in it doesn't really give us any information to work with. It's just reality. Everybody believes reality exists, but what's the nature of the reality you're talking about?
I don't even get the question reality exists, because that would be existence exists.
Okay, fine. So there is existence, and we agree. But what we're talking about is the fundamental nature of that. What differentiates your view from mine?
That's called experience. We share a reality. We have different experiences.
No, he's asking what's the ontological difference that you're describing. So what you're describing that's different.
It seems like you're saying it seems like you're giving an ultimate account. I know you're not being detailed about it, but you're saying just the ultimate explanation for what exists or for contingent reality is reality. And I think being charitable to you, and I would interpret that as like you're saying there is a fundamental layer of reality that accounts for reality. I think. I mean, that would be a better interpretation of what you're saying.
Reality is reality, though.
But that's the point. That's exactly why the word reality isn't very useful here. I don't know what you mean by it. Do you just mean like the material world?
No, the material world is what's contained within reality. Like, for example, if we were to talk about the universe, well, most people believe, and I disagree with it, that everything is the universe, that this table is part of the universe. I would disagree. This table that the phone's sitting on is a containment of the universe. The universe, if I was to walk into a room and go to a bookshelf and pick up a book, I'm not going to say that I'm going to read the room. I'm going to say I'm going to read the book, because the book is not part of the room.
The book and the table are both within the universe or within the room, and the universe is within reality.
Yeah.
Now I know what the room is, but what's reality?
Existence.
So do But then that's because here reality is sort of synonymous with existence. So then this becomes a tautology again.
I just don't get it.
Well, I mean, yeah, because you can't break it down anymore, and that's what I've said multiple times, and we're still here trying to break it down.
I don't know,
but
but
the point is, you haven't given any kind of useful information to break down. You're just,
for example,
you're just saying,
is it space and time? Do you mean
no? Space, time, and matter and experience derives from reality, which is the uncaused cause, the very fundamental thing. The causal principle is reality.
Okay, perfect. So you agree in a necessary foundation of reality. So let's just cut to the chase. You accept stage one cosmological arguments. There is a necessary foundation of reality. Now, can we ask any questions about that? Nature of, or are you saying there is a fundamental nature of reality, but I can't say anything about it? I just don't know what it is.
Well, I'm not. You said before. Okay, so we've already accepted the kalam. Is that what you said?
The stage one, which is basically takes you to a necessary being, basically necessary existence, doesn't have to be God. Stage two of these arguments is when we ask further questions and try to identify whether it's God or not. But so you accept stage one cosmological arguments, and you're saying there is a fundamental nature. Now, I think the next question would be: can we say anything about that fundamental nature of reality? Like, is it natural? You don't think so? Are you agnostic about it in the sense that it could literally be God or something natural or just literally anything?
Yes, as long as the perception of whatever that God being
spaghetti monster.
No, lam yulid wa lam yulid.
So you can't. Wait. So you can say certain things about it. Yeah, because Sharif is asking him whether it could be a trinity, and he said no. So I guess you can say certain things about it. I mean.
Even in the negative sense, at least.
In the negative,
yeah. In the positive sense, you could say that, yeah, in the negative sense, you could say it couldn't be this because of this reason.
So you can rule things out.
Polytheism, yeah, you can rule any polytheistic or tritheistic or trinitarian view of a God. You can rule those out right out of the way. And then
you can make
on the Unitarian monotheistic
claims as well. Let me give you a positive claim that you would agree with. It has causal power. That's a positive claim. Would you agree that it has causal power?
Has causal power.
The ability to cause things.
Or at least the power to sustain the world, because it is the foundation.
Yes.
So that is it. So we can say some things, right? So it has causal power. It has the power to sustain.
It's the source of power.
It's the source of all power. Right? So we can make some positive claims about it. Now, I think the fundamental question here will be, how far can we go?
Not far enough to say that there's a mind that exists outside of a physical brain.
How far do you need to go to say that there are other minds? I know you don't like this question, but because
there are other minds. I thought we were talking about God.
No, because the question is related. You're saying you can't make a claim about it that it has a mind because for some reason we couldn't possibly investigate that. But by that same logic, you couldn't investigate whether I had a mind.
But now we're shifting the goalpost. Now I'm talking about something else.
No, I'm just.
It's a stage. So you can, for example, if it's possible to acknowledge the existence of other minds, i.e., that I'm a mind, then that's a necessary step in order to be able to even say that there's this ultimate mind.
Do you have a physical
I guess
brain?
What I'm asking, Justin, just to clarify, what I'm asking basically is, what is it about this fundamental layer of reality that is so different about that's so different in the sense that we couldn't possibly attribute a mind to it while you could attribute a mind to me? It's the brain.
Yes, you have a physical brain. We have never ever demonstrated a mind existing outside of a physical brain of some sort.
Justin, did you come to the conclusion that Abdurrahman is a physical brain and therefore a mind because you saw his brain?
I'm agnostic on that.
but you have to assume a physicalist theory of mind in order to actually definitively make the claim that something with a mind has to have a brain. I mean,
no, but I'm
not making a positive claim in the sense that is true. I'm saying that using induction, all that we've ever been able to do is see that minds exist within physical brains at the intelligence level that we're speaking of right now. We could say plants, there's certain trees that stop growing acorns when they have an infestation of squirrels. To get the squirrels to go away, they move to other trees and then they start growing stuff again. They don't have a physical brain, But when we're talking about an intelligence of some sort, like we have, or something that would be more intelligent than us, as in, i.e., a god, I've never seen a brain or a mind outside of a physical brain.
No, I'm not trying to argue about the philosophy of mind with you and how we come to these conclusions. I'm trying to say, in order to say what you're saying, you have to assume. Okay, not assume in the sense that you don't have reasons for it, but you have to bring to the table a physicalist, reductionist theory of mind that, says that only things with brains can have minds, right? That's your line of reasoning, which is the reason you're saying we can't say anything with regard to the mentality or the mental activity of the fundamental nature of reality. But if I have a different understanding, or if I come from a different philosophy of mind, then maybe I could say something else. Maybe based on the criteria that I put for what counts for something that has mental activity is very different from your physicalist account, and on that basis, I can make a claim about the fundamental nature of reality. Maybe.
Sure. But how much more baggage does your view come compared to mine?
But with that's both baggage. We both have baggage. You're coming with the physicalist understanding. I'm coming with a different one.
My question wasn't does our claims have baggage. I said how much more baggage does yours come?
So how are you defining baggage here? How are you using baggage?
Extra presuppositions or extra things that we need to investigate.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't want any of those. I mean, in the sense that I wouldn't want any assumptions that couldn't possibly be justified. What I'm saying is whatever claims I'm going to make need to be justifiable claims. So I agree that we shouldn't come with baggage in the sense that we bring forward unjustified assumptions. What I'm saying is if I have a justified philosophy of mind that, or theory of mind that allows for me to to attribute a mental activity to something that you couldn't possibly say the same for because of your physicalist presupposition, then what I'm saying is right now we're coming from different perspectives, and I can say more things about the fundamental nature of reality. So it all hinges on this debate about consciousness and the philosophy of mind.
Justin, I think the issue that you're doing is you're trying to say that the reason why I know mind exists is because I see a physical person. And what we're saying is something slightly different. We're saying the reason why we believe there's a conscious being that's a necessary foundation is the same way we would come to the conclusion that there was a conscious being that wrote a book, even if though I didn't physically see the person writing the book. Because what I'm sensing is the fact that this book contains contingent things that are not necessary to produce the words in the order to create the particular meaning. Yeah. So the words could have been arranged in a potentially infinite number of ways, but because it's arranged in this particular way, it required somebody to determine it and somebody to have intentionality. So in the same way, this is what we're saying about the universe. We're saying that the universe is a contingent reality, which means that it could have been another way. It could have been an potential infinite other ways, yeah, with potentially infinite number of different laws. The fact that it has this one out of a number of possibilities means something must have selected it, yeah, and therefore we're using the same process with regards to, coming to the conclusion that consciousness or minds exist in other human beings. I don't need to. Like I said, if I've got something written on a piece of paper, I don't need to turn around and say, well, I've got to physically see the guy's brain to know that the mind produced that. That's not how we come to the conclusion. In the same way, I don't need to physically see you to know that you are an existence that has a mind, because I see pixels of you and I know it's not necessary for these pixels to exist and to construct a language. So I come to the rational conclusion through rational entailment that you exist and you have a mind. So Yusuf, really quickly, I think we're going to have to move on, Justin, because I think we've got somebody else on show, and you don't mind that, but I'll let Yusuf
add to this the comment below. So I'm going to read it and then just kind of add a little bit to it. So by the way, the word mind is ambiguous at best. It is wrong Islamically to attribute that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah does not need to mind things, i.e. think or calculate things. He already knows everything. So when you're thinking of a human mind, so it's probably a really, really good point to kind of acknowledge this. The whole function of a human mind is this processing of thinking through problems and trying to come to understand things. When we're talking about Allah, we're talking about something that is all-knowing. So there's no thinking process in the way that we have one, which is
also eternal.
Yeah. And so with this, whether or not the word mind is a good descriptor for what God is questionable. But yeah,
I mean, all we're saying is intentionality, that it's not just some sort of materialistic force that had to do the thing that it did. Yeah, because even then that would require an explanation, because why did it have to do this as opposed to that? So then you're falling into a contingent. Because then you're falling into a contingent being then, isn't it? You'd have to have some sort of intentionality in regards to that. Justin, look, I appreciate you coming on. Really, really do, yeah? The only thing is, because you've agreed that miracles is not irrational or illogical to believe in.
I hear you.
And we've slightly gone off topic, and people are thinking, why have we gone completely off? But obviously, because we've had these discussions. So, Justin, you're going to say?
I'm just going to say, you guys need to make an episode about the omniscience paradox, and I'll come on here and destroy every single one of you. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right,
but no, I appreciate you, Justin. Hopefully, we'll bring you on for part 2 of the contingency discussion that we're going to have.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Level 2.
All right,
cool. Appreciate that. See you, Justin.
See you live.
So I think we've got another guest that's waiting in the wings.
By the way, I'm
always
ready
appreciate
for the
Justin coming
omniscient paradox. I'm ready for that.
So we've got, I think, Advaita. Is that right? Or is it
Salah.
somebody else?
Salah.
Oh, Salah. I thought we had Advaita come on.
He came on after Salah did, so Salah's been waiting.
Oh, right. Okay, so Salah first, and then we're going to have Advaita later on. So Salah, assalamu alaikum.
You there, Salah?
If Salah's not on, we'll have to go to the other guest.
You need to unmute. I think he might not even know his mute.
Oh, right. You're muted, Salah.
He's muted.
You gotta unmute your mic, bro. Maybe he's not there, so we should just go to the next guy.
One. Yeah. Advaita, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you guys?
Oh, alhamdulillah. You're Muslim, Advaita?
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're not Muslim. Okay, then. Could you just introduce yourself? What do you believe in? Where you're from?
Yes, I'm from India, and I'm more of Advaita philosophy guy. It's like a non-duality, and so there is this philosophy of Advaita Vedanta that is like, but I don't believe in the Vedanta part of it. That comes from the Vedas, that believes in God and this Ishwar, Atma, all those stuff. I don't believe in that, but I believe in the Advaita part of that. That is the non-duality. There is just one ultimate reality, or one ultimate consciousness, or one ultimate matter, whatever it is. It's just one. There's nothing.
Yeah, Advaita, we're talking today about whether belief in miracles, is it irrational or not? Have you got any thoughts about the subject today?
So I would like, before I put my thoughts on that, I would like you guys to explain what you call a miracle.
Go for it.
Jake, do you wanna?
Well, what was his question?
What do you call a miracle?
A definition.
Yeah, so the definition I gave earlier, give me 1 second. And this is from an atheist, and that's why I try to give an unbiased source, is that a miracle occurs when the world is not left to itself, when something distinct from the natural order as a whole intrudes into it. Now, obviously, that's going to be a problem for you, as far as I can tell, because if there only really is one fundamental reality, in that sense that everything is pretty much the same, that I don't see how that definition would work for you.
Yep.
So maybe you can explain how you understand it, but if you want.
Okay, so I would say from the journal definition of the miracle, what it's generally or colloquially understood, I would not agree that miracles can happen. At max, what can happen is that we do not understand a particular phenomena that occurs. But there, in this nature, there is nothing that can go against the nature.
Well, yeah, we don't believe anything can go against nature in that sense either. I tried to explain that natural laws in the way that they're explained in science are predicated on the idea of isolated systems. And from our perspective, if a miracle occurs, the system wouldn't be isolated. So therefore, it wouldn't break the law. The law just simply wouldn't apply because it's conditional upon something that isn't met.
Yeah. So I would say yes. At max, yeah. So I'm just repeating myself. I would just say that we might not understand what's going on, but that doesn't mean it's a miracle.
Well, we would
If we
agree with you. I mean, we don't have a problem with that. Just because you don't understand it doesn't necessarily mean it's a miracle. It could be or it could not be.
Yeah,
But I guess
because I've seen some of the guys explaining miracles as a phenomena that we don't understand yet. So
No, we
in my
wouldn't
yeah,
say
defense,
that.
we wouldn't say that. No.
yeah. So because I've seen some of my Muslim friends saying that there are many things that we don't understand yet, and that's why we call them miracles.
No, we
So
No,
would
that's
that's
not
disagree
why
the
with
yeah.
that.
that. Yeah, Advaita. That's not even the Islamic definition of a miracle.
No,
Islamic
I'm not
definition would.
saying the Islamic, whether it's Islamic. I'm sorry,
I'm
I'm
just saying
cutting you off.
you can turn around to your Muslim friends and you can say actually that's not the correct definition. Something that's
Okay.
unexplainable. You can turn around and say the correct definition is something inimitable, something beyond human productive capacity, or something that has a non-naturalistic explanation. That's what we would define as a miracle or mu'jiza, something that challenges people in terms of their knowledge of expertise in a particular area, so that they can identify that this was beyond human productive capacity. So we don't, and I think I tried to mention it to Justin, but I think we got a little bit lost in the discussion. But we don't believe that there are things which are quote unquote random, which have no explanation. We believe that everything has an explanation in God. And so there are no probabilities per se. Probabilities themselves are explained by God, but rather if it's outside of our control, it's within God's control. And if something occurs that's beyond human control and human productive capacity, which breaks the regularity and the norms and cannot be explained by other quote unquote natural law, then that is within God's control, and therefore God caused that thing to occur.
What do you mean by God's control?
What do we mean by God's control? So we believe that what we live in a universe, we live in a reality. The reality that we sense are things that are limited, finite, and they're also dependent. Yeah, and the way that they have their attributes and their qualities are not explained by themselves. They're explained by other things that help explain it. Yeah, so we call these things contingent. These contingent realities, they need an explanation, and that explanation cannot be explained by other contingent realities because those would also need an explanation, and you'd have this problem of an infinite regress. So to avoid an infinite regress, you say you have to have a foundation, something that's eternal, something that doesn't need an explanation outside of itself, and that's what we're going to call the necessary foundation or a necessary being. And it's this necessary being or necessary foundation that we believe explains all contingent reality, explains why and causes the laws of the universe to exist the way that they exist. And so any miracle is not a violation of what we are doing, but rather any miracle is because this necessary being changes, for an instance, the regularity that he imposed upon the system from the outside.
Why would that God do? Why would He does that?
So we believe that he does that in order to prove to human beings that there is a prophet that is truly a prophet from God. So we don't believe that this is just, simply it just happens for no explanation. We believe that God sends down prophets, and with the prophets he sends them signs, and those signs are things which cannot be done by other human beings. So it's an indication that he's been sent by this necessary being who can do this act.
So by the definition, so are you trying to say, like, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that it can only happen when a prophet is present?
Well, we generally say, we talk about a specific type of miraculous event, we call it mu'jiza, and we say, yeah, this is for the prophets and the messengers.
So if so right now, currently, as if I understand correctly, the Islam's position is that there are no more prophets coming in. So you're saying that there are no more
We believe in one
miracles?
last miracle. We believe that there is one miracle which,
So,
as Jake mentioned earlier, is called the living miracle, which is because there are no more prophets, that the miracle, the sign and the evidence for the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has to be to the end of time, basically, to the end of human time. Yeah. So that miracle, we believe, is the Quran itself. So we believe that the Quran is beyond human productive capacity.
Okay, and how do we judge that?
So we're going to have a whole stream probably on this topic, Aaron.
Okay, I'm
but
sorry
in
if
essence,
I'm going off
yeah.
topic.
So in essence, what we're saying is that any person who claims, look, loads of people claim that they're from God and that they've got a communication and a message. We're not just going to accept their claim. And even if we say that miracles are logically possible, there's no illogical aspect to it. Doesn't just therefore means that we're going to accept anybody's claim that something, a miraculous event has occurred. Rather, what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, what's your evidence? How you're claiming to be from God? What's your evidence that you are from God? And if this person then is able to produce something which is beyond human productive capacity and has no naturalist explanation, then the only explanation is a supernatural explanation, i.e. from this existent being, this creator, this God. Does that make sense, Advaita? So it's evidential. We have to have evidence for every proposition we hold in belief.
I understand, but there are too many questions in this one, like why a prophet is required to talk to human beings, why the contact is required in the first place, and there are too many questions in that. Like you said, they're prophets, right? And then
yeah, there's a lot of questions. So obviously, why do we? In essence, we say prophets are sent as in order to provide guidance on how human beings live. The guidance that they're bringing to on how human beings should live and worship is brought because God has brought this to human beings. Why do we seek guidance? Because we are created with a very nature that wants guidance, that wants salvation, wants to understand our purpose of life. And the only way to really understand our purpose of life is to understand where we came from, whether we were created or not, and where we're going after we die. Once you answer those two questions, then you can understand your purpose. What is good, what is bad, how to worship, how to stay away from things that are incorrect.
Yeah. Okay. So now my point is, so all the human beings you're saying are created for just one purpose. They all have one purpose, a common purpose.
So I'm saying let's not even presume purpose, but in order to understand, we desire purpose. Yeah. So I think we can say all human beings desire to seek purpose. That's the first issue. The next question is, well, how do I come to the conclusion that purpose exists?
Okay, let's say we desire purpose. It's okay. I can.
Do you not desire purpose, Advaita?
No.
You don't desire purpose.
No.
You just want to live your life aimlessly.
What do you mean by live my life? I change forms. I always existed. I will always exist.
But in this life, do you want to achieve purpose? Do you want
we're going quite off topic here as well.
I can do many things.
It's probably best to wrap
things.
up.
So if you go in that would be a totally different philosophy. Okay, so the point is when you're saying uh, whether I desire a purpose or not depends on the time. Sometimes I do desire purpose, sometimes I do not. There is
Well,
no.
Yeah, sorry, Jake, go on.
I was just going to say, because we're getting off topic. I mean, the stream's supposed to be about miracles, and
Yep.
we do want to move on to the next guest shortly. But is there anything else you have to, or that you would like to say about the miracle topic that before you go?
Yeah. So what I would say is the miracles in general. I won't agree with that miracles happen. What I can say is there's one thing that always exists is the rule. One rule that exists even before a thing exists. The rule exists. What I mean by that is, let's say in a periodic table, there might be many elements that you don't know they exist, but you can make places for those elements once they are discovered or been invented in a form of setup or something where they will go. And even before you find them or they are discovered or whatever happens, they come into existence, you know how they behave. So that rule already exists even before that particular thing exists. So when you say miracle, there is no such thing as miracle. There are rules that exist in this universe, and if that event has to happen at some time, it cannot go against that particular rule, even if someone wants or someone doesn't want, because nobody can change the rules of the universe.
Yeah, so you're just saying when a thing happens that we would normally call or somebody might think is a miracle, it's not a miracle. It's just something that is in line with a rule that we don't really understand of the universe, right?
Yes, so it's a law that we haven't discovered yet. It's a law or a mathematical equation we haven't found yet. So it happened. It will fit in that equation. If it does fit in a particular equation, then it cannot exist in this universe. And
Yeah, I
if
mean, we would just
again,
Because we're close. We need to end here. But I just want to ask you if you can answer me just real quick. Within this monism that you're proposing, do you believe, like, is there a God? Like, is God basically existence?
so when you say God, does that mean it keeps record of my
Is there any intelligence or consciousness within, like, this one existence?
So even if it's there, yeah, so it can exist. So
Okay, so
it
just to say this, just to wrap up, I think what you're saying here is that you could be saying one of two things. Either there is an intelligence behind all this. It's all one, fine, but there is some kind of intelligent driving force behind nature, and that's just the way it works. The laws of nature are the way it works. If there is an intelligence, then what you're basically saying, you're basically proposing a Spinozan understanding of what the universe is, some sort of pantheistic understanding of what God is. And in that sense, I mean, many critiques can be launched against that, but generally speaking, if there is intelligence and there is intentionality, then basically what is a law of nature is just a choice of nature to do what it does, and it could refrain from that at any specific moment, and that's what we would call a miracle. If you're proposing non-intelligence, then what you're saying is that nature is just nature and things happen the way they are, and that's what we were talking about in the beginning in terms of a question begging definition of what nature is. So I think either way, I mean, it's just not, you either agree with us or it's just the other definition is not very helpful. I think we could just leave it at that.
Advaita, unfortunately, your mic's not very clear to the audience on the stream, but we really do appreciate you coming on, and we would want you to come back on future streams as well. Hopefully, you'll get the mic and everything will be sorted out at that time. I don't know if you want to say one or two quick last words before you leave.
Yeah, just keep it below 30 seconds, though, brother.
Yeah, I say sorry, and I'll keep in mind that next time my mic works properly. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your time.
Thank you
Thanks
very
a lot.
much for your
Thanks for
time.
joining.
Appreciate that, Advaita. Yeah, I
Bye.
think we've got another guest actually, and yeah, so we got another guest. I don't know the name of this guest. Sorry.
Pakistani theist.
Oh, Pakistani theist. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
Wow.
So
Wa
I
alaikum
think I
salam.
put you on the stream.
Walaikum
I
salam.
think you are taking non-Muslims. So
We're taking
sorry,
Muslims
my-
and non-Muslims. Don't worry.
yeah. So my take on this is quite simple. So how I see miracles is how you initially defined miracles. So I see miracles as something as like telephones, which were in Stone Age were deemed miracle. So if we brought our telephones to the Stone Age, they would deem our telephones as miracles. So that's how I see miracles. But yeah, miracles is a quite broad term. So if you are talking about in theology, so that's how the conversation has shaped the definition of miracle quite profoundly. So I won't ma- alter definition which we are which we are sticking to right now. So that's how.
What do you mean, Pakistani theist? What's your name? Sorry, it's not Pakistani theist. You don't mind me asking your real name, do you? Or do you want me to call you
Yeah,
Pakistani theist?
sure, you can call me Abdullah.
Abdullah. Okay, Abdullah. So, Abdullah, what do you mean by the fact that a phone in the Stone Ages would be a miracle? Because obviously it would be a miracle of time travel.
Exactly. So in my worldview, miracle has a lot of different, you can go with anything when you use the term. As a student of linguistics, I understand that words can have quite different, different pragmatic definitions, or you can have a variety of definitions for of single word. So it all depends on the context. So in what context you're using miracle, so it all depends on the context.
So I think what Jake and the other brothers have mentioned is that, and obviously Jake can correct me, but in essence what we're saying is something that doesn't fit within the regularity or the laws of the universe, or in other words, something that has a non-naturalistic explanation. So we're not talking about, somebody winning the lottery or a person recovering from stage 4 cancer. Yeah, that's not what we'd call a miracle, because there is still a naturalistic explanation for all of these things.
I
But
understand,
we're
but
saying where you
you
can't
mentioned
have a
imitable.
yeah.
Imitable. You mentioned imitable, term imitable, meaning that it cannot. It challenges our limited contingent beings. It actually challenges contingent beings, or limited beings. So it is beyond anything. So basically, it's beyond anything. So you
Yeah,
cannot.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I understand where you're coming from. So what I was actually proposing is that it all depends on how you actually contextualize the word. So I could be, saying Sunday that it's just a miracle how Manchester United won the match. So it all depends on the context. So that's all.
No, it's no miracle when Man United win the match. They're always the better team. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, you're right. But obviously, in this context, I think what we're trying to say is we're saying it in the context of, a miraculous event, something that cannot be explained by nature, something that requires a supernatural explanation in order to explain
so let me
the
ask
event.
a question. Can I ask a question? Simple question.
Yeah, you got JK who'll answer it.
So I have a simple question. If we had scientists at the time of the prophet, or any prophet, and they had all the equipments and all the tools to experiment the miracles, would they be able to experiment them under their limited scientific framework?
What do you mean? Would they be able to experiment them? Would they be able to notify or identify what the cause is? Is that what your question is?
Yeah, like how they, investigate.
No, I don't think they would be able to. No, because the
No.
miracle's outside of their paradigm. So, like the example of the telephone, like if they went back and we had a time machine and we went back and showed people this phone, people might
Yeah.
think it's a miracle. They're saying, "Wow, what is this cell phone? I mean, this is really strange." They might think it's a miracle, right? But in actuality, it wouldn't be a miracle, other than the point of the time machine, maybe. But I mean, the difference is that if you went back, and the same thing what we say about the Quran, no matter how much scientific, you will not be able to produce something like it. That's the claim. Likewise, certain miracles in the past that the prophets performed, with any sort of technological or scientific advancement, it doesn't matter. They won't be able to investigate it because the miracle itself is out of the purview of science. That's the whole point of it.
In essence, what you would do when you're investigating quote unquote a miracle, a sign for prophethood, is you're trying to say, can this be explained by nature? Is there a naturalistic explanation to this? If there's no naturalistic explanation, then you have to say, well, okay, there is still an explanation, but the explanation now is supernatural. Because we've already proven that God exists through a rational process, this is presupposing this, then the only explanation would be, well, okay, God, this necessary being, is the thing that causes the universe to exist and the universe to operate according to a system. So it's therefore God that has caused this thing not to follow this quote-unquote naturalistic pattern
Yeah,
that God imposed.
ultimately it comes down to the metaphysical explanation of the miracle, if I'm correct in phrasing that.
Yeah,
So,
what do you mean by metaphysical explanation? Sorry.
a metaphysical
I'm not trying to
explanation
be
in the fact, yeah, in a fact that which cannot be natural, in a natural world,
Yeah.
which
So
may or
scientists,
may not be. Yeah.
So Abdullah, scientists are not going to investigate what the naturalist explanation is. Maybe the most all a scientist can do is investigate and find that there is no naturalist explanation. Yeah. So, for example, when Isa alayhi salam healed the sick, brought people back from the dead, there was no naturalist explanation for that because it wasn't even contained within the knowledge set of the people at that time in order to do those particular actions. So therefore, the only explanation would be a non-naturalistic explanation as to how Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, brought people back from the dead, i.e. God gave him the capacity to do this, or it was done by the permission of God, etc. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes
Abdullah?
sense. Yeah,
Yeah?
it made sense because recently I was going through, some atheists who were, just poking fun at, Jonah,
Right.
Jonah. So they actually was saying that how, Jonah could be in a fish stomach. So
Hmm.
I saw an apologist, a Muslim apologist. He jumped in and he said that it was not a fish, it was a whale, which and he used all scientific, data, and he tried to justify that using
No, that's the
science.
wrong way.
So,
Wrong way.
I was
Yeah.
also quite skeptic about that approach. So, this discussion has quite helped me a lot with this.
It's
It
really,
has tried to
Alhamdulillah.
explain me.
it's really, yeah, Abdullah, it's really important. When we're talking about miracles, you're right. It's a different knowledge set. We don't need to explain miracles by naturalistic causation. The very definition of a miracle is it's beyond naturalistic causation. So we're not looking at, for example, the moon split. Okay, so let's look for the crack in the moon, yeah, to prove it, to prove the miracle. Or we have to explain how a whale could swallow a human being, or a fish or creature swallowed a human being, or how is it that a human being could travel faster than light. We don't need any naturalistic explanation because we're saying it's a violation of natural law. It has no naturalist explanation. By bringing in naturalist explanation, you cause more problems, because that's when they'll say, "Oh, right. Well, actually, you've got the science wrong. You know, apparently the whale's throat is like the size of that. Yeah. So how's a human being going to get through that? So you're going to create more problems." It's simply something that has no naturalist explanation, which therefore means that we're not looking for science to answer how this miracle occurred. Yeah, and that's not the question that we're looking at.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know if
just
somebody
last
could.
thing.
I was going to say, I don't know if somebody could put what I just commented on in the chat. I put the definition of miracle. It's the first thing you pull up on Google by Oxford. It says a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency. So this is what we're saying. It's something
Pharaoh,
that it
Pharaoh would
cannot
disagree with that.
Yeah, it cannot be explained by natural or scientific laws. So if you're claiming that it's a miracle and then the person who actually believes in it is trying to use science to explain it, they're already doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get your point.
Yeah.
So even
But
if
this,
we go with Jonah, then we can say that Jonah was inside a fish. We don't need to justify it and use, it was inside, he was inside, a whale. So
Yeah, and the Quran doesn't. I don't think the Quran actually mentions a whale anyway. But yeah, it could be a creature that was created by Allah Subhanahu wa Taala for that particular purpose. And it occurred by the will of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, which goes against anything that we could possibly conceptualize in our own minds. So there's nothing, there's nothing. We're not here to explain miracles by naturalistic laws, because that's wrong. But what is important is to be able to explain that the violation of natural laws is not in and of itself a logical contradiction, nor should it be as a basis to simply dismiss a claim from a religion. So if we as Muslims claim that Yunus alayhi salam was inside this creature within the sea, that in and of itself shouldn't be, an atheist shouldn't turn around and say, well, that can't be right. Yeah, or, somebody who's not Muslim says, that can't be right, therefore the religion is false. It's not the right basis by which to assess whether something's right or wrong. And in the same way, myself and the other brothers here, we don't criticize Christianity because they believe that Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, walked on water. Yeah, we do. That's, for us, that's just a possible claim for somebody who claims to have a miracle. Yeah, that's not logically contradictory. It doesn't mean we necessarily affirm it, because obviously we need valid testimonial evidence to affirm it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it therefore is false. Yeah, so it just remains unproven.
Yeah,
I think.
I have just last.
Sorry, bro. Really sorry.
Yusuf wants to.
No, I was just going to say, we keep doing this, so we need to really wrap up. It's been 2.5 hours. I need to go as well. So
just last point, I just want to touch upon
really
this
quick.
last
You've got
point.
20 seconds.
Just quick. So the last point was that when I hear some atheists, they actually quite pull up this an old contention that how al-Buraq is illogical. So when I hear this, that an existence is illogical, that actually strikes my mind, and I'm in the thought that existence cannot be illogical unless and until its identity is logically contradicting. So how I see
show
is that
something specifically in the thing that is contradictory. Yeah. Simply saying I have never experienced it, we've got no evidence, that's not a contradiction. That's just the lack of evidence for a positive belief in a particular thing according to what they need. So it's literally just a case of, like, if you're going to say it's a contradiction, bring forward an argument, show me explicitly with a syllogism, like premise 1, premise 2, conclusion, blah, 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 showing explicitly why this thing is a contradiction. And then obviously we can move forward from there. But just saying it, people use these words, like they'll say, oh, it's a contradiction. It's well, where? Give me the argument. How is it? just using the word isn't enough to prove the point. You've got to show that explicitly. But I think we should leave it there for the moment. Jazakallah khair for joining us today, Pakistani.
Jazakallah khair.
Abdullah. And we hope we see you on future streams again as well, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
I don't know if any brothers want the last word, Yusuf or Jake. Any last thoughts?
I thought there was somebody
I
else,
wanted
but...
to say something real quick, if I can,
Yeah.
about the. So I mean, just generally about the question: is it irrational? I am not sure if we emphasized enough that it can be irrational believing in miracles, and not every miraculous account is something that is rational to believe in. And I think we should have more, from an Islamic perspective, it's more of a top-down than bottom-up approach towards believing in miracles, because the epistemic concerns that we do share with atheists of how we can know that something is true is there within the Islamic context. So it is important for it to be within in a contextualized rational framework for us to believe in these accounts as a byproduct or consequence of our rational basis for belief. And we have several examples within scripture of miracles, supposed miracles that were done by liars and false prophets. For example, as-Samiri in the story of Prophet Musa, and the magicians of Pharaoh, for example. If they went doing all these tricks in the streets, then should we just believe everything they say? No. So on that basis, I think it's very important to point to the fact that within the Islamic context, a miracle should only be rationalizable through the foundation of your belief, and that it's not always rational to believe in miracles, and miracles alone do not justify your belief. Finally, the Quran is special. Why? Because all prophets have come with a message from God and miracles that kind of add justification to their message. In the case of the Quran, what we claim is those two were put together, and the message is the miracle, in the sense that you can assess its coherence and believe in God on that basis. And also at the same time, you have timeless access to its claim of being inimitable and miraculous. And that's what, from our perspective, is very unique about the Quranic claim of inimitability. And I think...
an example of an irrational miracle, for example, if someone came to you and said, I've just seen a miracle, I saw a man, going back to Sharif's good example, I saw a man and he was 5 foot and 8 foot simultaneously. It's like, at that point, you can say that that's an irrational miracle, because it's claiming that two contradictory positions are there. Or, this person was, I saw this person and he was existing and not existing simultaneously. Or, these kind of things, they would fall under the specific realm of a contradiction of two opposing claims.
I mean, even or the non-contradictory stuff without a basis for believing in it. So if someone told me they believe in, I think Christianity.
Maybe Abdurrahman, I'll give you an example, Abdurrahman. A few years ago, in the 1990s, I think it was, there was a Hindu statue that was seen to drink milk. I don't know if you guys heard of this. And there were people like, oh my gosh, this is a miracle. And I think what you're saying, Abdurrahman, is, well, hold on. Does that fit within our understanding about the nature of reality and the belief in a creator that's singular? Yeah. Because, you might come across something, quote unquote, miraculous, or something that I personally cannot explain. They found an explanation, by the way, and it was a naturalistic explanation. But if somebody comes across something which is miraculous, it doesn't make their claim necessarily true from God if the foundation of it is irrational. Yeah, like belief in more than one God. Yeah. Jake, we're going to have to move on. So, Jake, do you want to just sort of summarize your own thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, the question of the stream was whether or not belief in miracles is irrational. I think we established, even with Karlos, the first guest, that he agreed with us that in principle, they're not necessarily illogical. There's not a immediate contradiction between a miracle on the one hand and a law of nature on the other hand, which from my perspective, that's the claim that I get is like this typical internet atheist motif. I get it constantly online. And then the second thing is by demonstrating that there is no immediate conflict between a miracle on the one hand and a law of nature on the other hand, the claim of the Trinity being somewhat analogous with a miracle, we can dispel that and say, no, we can still believe in the reality of miracles and reject the Trinity. Just because we reject the Trinity doesn't necessitate that we therefore have to be consistent and reject all miracles. And so those two things are what I had consistently in mind. I think even our atheist guests, both Justin and Karlos, agreed that in principle, miracles are not logically contradictory. So I think that suffices as this stream being a success.
Yusuf, I don't know if you've got any quick thoughts that you want to sum up.
Yeah, it's literally that. It's I think Jake's summed it up pretty well. That you can talk about miracles, like basically talking about miracles in an absolute sense, just because you don't accept one kind of miracle or one claim of a particular sort of miracle, that you have to reject every possible miracle. There's more nuance to it than that, and I think it shows lack of thought on the subject matter. If you're saying that because you're rejecting this, then why do you accept the Burak, or why do you accept the splitting of the moon? There is rational or reasonable criteria for why you can accept one and reject the other, and that again just fully kind of is underpinned by this idea of explicit contradictions within the framework of the thing that's being put forward. So with the Trinity thing, if you go back to watch our previous stream, the last one we did on whether or not the Trinity is coherent, you see an in-depth rationale as to why we would say that this is logical or illogical, or a logical problem. And then at that point, obviously you can make this appeal to mystery if you want to, but that appeal to mystery has to in some way admit that the appearance of a logical problem to some degree, and obviously that whole pulling this card, I wanted to pull it out. I've been waiting for that. It's literally it's an acknowledgement of the fact that there is a problem that needs to be answered, and that they have a lack of an answer for it. Obviously, the issue there is whether or not this particular problem is explicitly illogical, or it's just that a lack, the problem of ignorance, as they say, which again kind of be this appeal to.
It's funny, Yusuf, what you said there reminds me of a discussion that Dawkins had. He had an interview, I think, with Mehdi Hassan a few years back, and he was trying to say, how stupid are Muslims who believe in the Burak and the Prophet ﷺ ascended to heaven and things like that. And one Muslim in the audience, he simply asked him the question. He goes, well, what's more incredulous? The entire universe from nothing, or somebody on a Burak or a horse, flying horse, because obviously a entire universe from absolute nothing is completely incredulous. And it reminds me of a quote, I think it's a quote from a particular atheist philosopher, I can't remember the particular name now, and he basically said, if you grant me one miracle, I will explain the rest.
Everything else.
I will explain the rest. So I think that's in essence what they do. Jazakallah khair for everybody listening. Next 2 weeks time, we will be talking about, I think, consciousness and rationality. Can they be grounded under naturalism? So please look out for that. If there are changes, we'll make some changes, but we're going to discuss that next week. Jazakallah khair to the brothers on the panel, to everybody who phoned in and had a discussion with us as well. Really do appreciate that. Hopefully, inshallah, people found that beneficial. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Where's the outro?